Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jennifer Dulos. Jennifer Dulos was born in 1968 in New York. Her father is Hilliard Farber, a banker, and her mother is Gloria Tenenberg, a philanthropist. Jennifer has an older sister, Melissa Irene Farber. Jennifer graduated from Brown University in 1990 and later earned a master's degree in creative writing from New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. Jennifer is married to Fotis and they have 5 children together, all named after Greek Orthodox saints, 3 sons, Petros, Theodore, and Constantine, and 2 daughters, Christiane and Cleopatra. Jennifer and Fotis were married for 13 years before ending their marriage in 2017. After that, Jennifer began to feel afraid of her ex-husband. Which makes us wonder, who is Fotis and what changed him? Fotis Dulos was born on August 6, 1967, in Turkey. He grew up in Athens, Greece, and moved to the United States in 1986. He attended Brown University, graduating in 1989. Fotis then went on to earn a master's degree in finance from Columbia Business School. Fotis met his first wife, Hilary Vanessa Alama, at Brown University and married her in Athens in 2000. After their divorce in 2004, he moved to Connecticut and married Jennifer a month later, despite having known her since he was married to Hilary. They moved to Farmington and had 5 children. The marriage of Jennifer and Fotis began to crumble in 2012 and completely collapsed in 2017. Jennifer shared her marital struggles in a blog post in March 2012. She expressed her wish to be stronger to face conflicts without fear. In 2017, Jennifer decided to file for divorce. The reason was that Fotis had an affair with Michelle Troconis, a Venezuelan colleague. Jennifer also requested custody of the 5 children, but the court only granted joint custody. Jennifer feared for her safety and that of her children. She accused Fotis of unsafe behavior, bullying, intimidation, and excessive control. She recounted an incident with Fotis on June 3, 2017. When Fotis learned that she had made plans for the children on Saturday morning, he became angry and lost control. Jennifer said Fotis became angry and agitated, causing her to run upstairs to get away from him. However, Fotis chased her upstairs. Despite Jennifer locking and bolting the door, Fotis continued to verbally and physically abuse and threaten her, leaving her feeling trapped and helpless. Jennifer felt unsafe around her husband. When she decided to file for divorce, the situation became even more dangerous. In an interview, Jennifer shared that she was very afraid of Fotis. She realized that her desire for a divorce had deeply angered Fotis, and she feared that he might retaliate by causing her harm. Jennifer revealed that when she filed for divorce in May 2017, Fotis threatened to kidnap and harm their children if she did not accept his divorce terms. Fotis even purchased a gun that year. In 2018, Jennifer filed for emergency custody of the children. During the trial, the court found that Fotis had violated multiple court orders. Finally, Jennifer was awarded primary custody of the children. Fotis was only allowed supervised visits and phone calls were monitored. Jennifer and the children moved to a rented house in New Canaan, 70 miles from Fotis's home. Fotis was devastated by Jennifer's allegations. In an email to her in 2017, he expressed concern for the children's well-being. He realized that the children needed both parents, not just one. Fotis pleaded with Jennifer to reconsider their marriage for the sake of the children. He even suggested that they could live as partners and learn to accept each other. While denying Jennifer's allegations, Fotis counterclaimed that she had turned the children against him. He claimed that Jennifer called him a psychopath and told the children that he did not care about them. Fotis also claimed that Jennifer bragged about dragging out the divorce for 2 years so she could hire the mafia to break his legs. Fotis denied threatening to kidnap his child and explained that he bought the gun to protect his home. However, Fotis's argument not be credible given the events that followed. Jennifer was last seen at around 8:05 a.m. on May 24, 2019, after dropping her child off at school in New Canaan. She had 2 doctor's appointments in New York at 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. When Jennifer failed to show up for these appointments, which she never missed, her friends reported her missing to the police. Lauren Almeida, Jennifer's live-in nanny, also noticed something unusual. When she arrived at Jennifer's apartment at 11:30 a.m., she found the Range Rover in the garage, while Jennifer's Chevrolet Suburban was missing. However, Lauren did not notify the police until 7 p.m. Jennifer's prolonged and unusual absence, along with her failure to notify anyone of her departure, raised serious concerns for her safety. After receiving disturbing reports, the police investigated and searched Jennifer's New Canaan home. The results of the search shocked everyone who cared about Jennifer. They found blood stains in the garage, on the walls, on the doors, and on the outside of the Range Rover. Inside the home, there were scattered blood stains in the kitchen, and most notably, blood from both Jennifer and her husband, Fotis. This discovery raised suspicions that Fotis may have murdered his wife. The police investigation found that Fotis was present at Jennifer's home on the day she went missing. Police found bicycle tracks around the house, indicating that Fotis had arrived there on a bicycle. According to the police theory, Fotis stalked and waited for Jennifer to return from dropping off her children at school. He then brutally murdered her, cleaned up the scene, and destroyed the evidence. A neighbor's security camera recorded a Chevrolet Suburban leaving Jennifer's home at 10:25 a.m. Police believe Fotis was the driver of the vehicle. Police alleged that Fotis hid Jennifer's body along with items used to clean up the crime scene in his vehicle. He then abandoned the vehicle about 3 miles from the town of New Canaan. Based on these suspicious actions, police believe Fotis was the perpetrator of Jennifer's death and a ruthless killer. At around 7:30 p.m. that night, security cameras recorded Fotis and his girlfriend Michelle taking out the trash. Notably, they used up to 30 different garbage bags along Alfred Avenue in Hartford. When police searched the garbage bags, they found several suspicious items in the trash bags, including toiletries, bloody clothing, and used gloves. Blood on the clothing matched Jennifer, while Fotis' DNA was found on a glove and a garbage bag. These findings confirmed police's initial suspicions that Fotis was involved in Jennifer's disappearance. The case of Fotis murdering his wife was shocking, but what was even more shocking was the involvement of his girlfriend, Michelle Triconis. Michelle, a Venezuelan woman, had many roles in her life: mother, equestrian athlete, and former ESPN reporter in South America. However, no one expected her to become an accomplice in a murder. Michelle began a relationship with Fotis while he was still married to Jennifer, contributing to the breakdown of their marriage. After Jennifer went missing, the police questioned Michelle. When asked about her whereabouts on the day Jennifer disappeared, Michelle said she had lunch with Fotis and then went with him to one of Fotis' properties to clean up in preparation for a meeting with a client. However, the police suspected that this cleaning was actually to erase traces related to Jennifer's death. On the morning of May 24, 2019, Fotis stole a Toyota Tacoma truck from an employee and drove it to New Canaan, Connecticut. A school bus camera captured the truck traveling at high speed toward Wavani Park at 7:05 a.m. Jennifer's Chevrolet Suburban was later found in the park. Police found a bicycle tire in the trunk of the truck, supporting the theory that Fotis rode his bicycle approximately 3 miles from Wavani Park to Jennifer's New Canaan home. Police believe Fotis arrived at Jennifer's home before she left. When Jennifer arrived at the garage, Fotis attacked her. He then covered up the evidence. Fotis put Jennifer's body in her Chevrolet Suburban and drove to Wavani Park, where he transferred Jennifer's body to his truck. Despite Fotis's efforts to cover up his tracks, he left behind two key pieces of evidence at his new home in Canaan: his DNA on the doorknob and a mixture of his and Jennifer's blood on the kitchen faucet. Police believe Fotis spent hours cleaning the house. This was reinforced by neighbor surveillance footage that showed Jennifer's Chevrolet Suburban leaving the house around 11 p.m. Police were even more convinced of Fotis's guilt when he acted suspiciously 5 days after his wife's disappearance. Fotis drove away again in the truck without permission. This time, his destination confirmed police's suspicions. He drove straight to a local car wash and detail shop. Surveillance video captured a black SUV driven by Michelle following the truck. In the video, Fotis is seen stopping at a car wash, then getting into Michelle's SUV. Police suspect their intent was to remove evidence from the vehicle. However, this attempt failed when Jennifer's DNA was discovered by police on the passenger seat of the truck. Fotis became the prime suspect in Jennifer's disappearance due to the substantial evidence against him. On June 7, 2020, Fotis was arrested and charged with murder and kidnapping in connection with Jennifer's case. This was the first time he had been charged with these crimes, although the incident had occurred earlier. Fotis and Michelle were arrested on June 1, 2019, at a hotel in Anson, Connecticut. However, they were only charged with obstructing prosecution and tampering with evidence, not murder. This is because at the time, the police did not have enough evidence to charge them with the murder. While many may think that Fotis should have been arrested earlier on more serious charges, this only happened after the police gathered more evidence. Both Fotis and Michelle pleaded not guilty. Fotis hired attorney Norm Pattis to defend him. Norm was convinced that Jennifer was dead. Initially, Fotis and Michelle were released. However, in September 2019, they were arrested again on charges of tampering with evidence and obstructing justice. In October 2019, Fotis appeared in court to contest the charges against him. The judge said he would carefully review the case, listening to arguments from both the prosecution and the defense. During this time, Jennifer and Fotis's 5 children lived with their grandmother. The children's grandmother was granted temporary custody by the court. In January 2020, Fotis was arrested and charged with murdering his ex-wife in a Waterloo courtroom. At the same time, his girlfriend, Michelle, was also arrested for attempted murder. After his arrest, Michelle distanced herself from Fotis. In an interview, she admitted that she had made a big mistake in trusting Fotis. Before the incident, Michelle reportedly moved out of Fotis' $5 million home in Farmington with her daughter. Kent Douglas Mawhinney, a former lawyer and friend of Fotis, was also arrested and charged with attempted murder. Police aggressively arrested him. They believe Kent helped Fotis and Michelle create an alibi for the morning of Jennifer's disappearance. During the same period, Kent also faced charges of rape against his wife. He was divorced from his wife, and the situation became even more tense after he was arrested in connection with Jennifer's case. Kent's wife felt her life was in serious danger. Kent's wife reported to the South Windsor Police Department that her husband was plotting to kill her with the help of Fotis. During the investigation, police discovered that Kent was a member of the East Granby Gun Club, a local hunting group. Police were notified that a human grave had been found on land associated with the club. After searching the property, police made a suspicious discovery: a shallow grave on the secluded property. Police found 2 bags of lime and a blue tarp in the grave. But no body. They suspect that someone had dug up the grave. Although the suspects have been arrested, Jennifer's body has not been found. Her family is devastated. Although justice is imminent for their daughter, they acknowledge that arresting Jennifer's killer will not bring her back, so the family's grief will never be completely gone. Fotis was set on $6 million bail on January 8, 2020. He was released the following day, but is due back in court on February 8, 2020. Michelle was also released on bail. Kent was initially set on $2 million bail, but it was later reduced to more than $200,000. He was released on bail on October 19, 2020. After Fotis's heinous acts began to be discovered, he became extremely fearful. On January 28, 2020, Fotis failed to appear at an emergency hearing, prompting the judge to issue a warrant for his arrest. When police arrived at Fotis's Farmington home to serve the warrant, they found him unconscious in his car. Unable to face the consequences of his actions, Fotis attempted suicide by inhaling carbon monoxide. He connected the SUV's exhaust pipe to a vacuum cleaner and placed it inside his car. Police performed CPR and restored his weak heartbeat. He was then taken by ambulance to Yukon Medical Center, then transferred to Jacob Medical Center in the Bronx for hyperbaric oxygen therapy. While in the hospital, Fotis' children, who were living with their grandmother, visited him for the first time since he was charged with Jennifer's murder. Police found a suicide note in Fotis's car. In it, he wrote that he could not bear to spend even 1 hour in jail for a crime he knew nothing about. On January 30, 2020, Jacobs Medical Center confirmed Fotis' death. Police later released a report that included information from Anna Curry, Fotis' last girlfriend. Anna said she was with Fotis on the day of the emergency hearing. According to Anna, she and Fotis planned to drive to court together, but finally Fotis suggested they go separately. Anna admitted that she was panicked and she received a call from Fotis's lawyer asking about Fotis's absence from court. Anna was driving at the time and responded that Fotis was supposed to be there. The attorney said the GPS device showed that Fotis was still at his home in Farmington. Anna immediately realized that Fotis might have harmed himself and asked the attorney to call 911. After Fotis' death, the murder charges against him were dismissed on March 3, 2020. The judge ordered the prosecutor to apply null prosequa, abandonment of prosecution. This does not mean that Fotis is acquitted, but simply that the case cannot proceed due to his death. Abandonment of prosecution acknowledges this fact, but gives the prosecutor 1 year to reopen the case if he wishes. Otherwise, the case will be dismissed permanently. During the hearing, Fotis' attorney Norm Pattis wanted to clear his client's name. He claimed that Fotis was framed and argued that the framer had dumped bloody clothes and incriminating evidence in front of Fotis's house. Norm explained that if Fotis was the perpetrator, he would not have accidentally dumped these items, leading to the police discovering them on surveillance cameras. Norm asked for the Fotis estate to be substituted as a defendant, but the request was not considered. Michelle is under house arrest after being charged with conspiracy to murder Jennifer. Michelle's attorney, John Sean, admitted in an interview that his client's case has not progressed. Michelle was scheduled to appear in court on August 6, 2020, while Kent Douglas Mamony was scheduled to appear in court on June 2, 2020. Both have pleaded not guilty to the charges. In an interview, Michelle responded to those who judge her without knowing her well. She admitted that she can be wrong about others, but she cannot say whether Fotis killed his wife. However, she believes that believing Fotis was a waste of time, and this has been proven true. For years after Jennifer went missing, she has still not been found. Police searched for her body in several locations over the years. In 2019, they began searching Wavani Park, 3 miles from New Canaan. They used dogs and a helicopter to thoroughly search the area. The search for Jennifer expanded beyond the initial area, including New York City, where the family owned property. After a thorough search there, police turned their attention to central Connecticut. In Hartford, police discovered surveillance footage showing Fotis dumping trash bags in various dumpsters around the city. This led to a weeks-long search of the waste treatment plant, where police found key evidence. The search continued at a fishing pond in Avon that the Dulos family frequented. Police also searched properties owned by Jennifer's husband's company in central Connecticut, with an estimated 3,000 acres searched. However, despite extensive search efforts, Jennifer has not been found. In August 2021, the investigation led police to a Farmington home on Mountain Spring Road that was associated with Jennifer's husband. Police decided to search the home to follow up on previous leads. They invited Bob Perry, a well-known expert in finding unmarked graves, to join the search. Police also brought in septic tank pumping equipment and an excavator to increase the effectiveness of the search. However, to date, police have not released any information about the discovery of Jennifer's body. Although the tragedy of Jennifer was heartbreaking, it did lead to a positive outcome. In May 2021, the Connecticut Senate passed a landmark domestic violence bill. The bill was named after Jennifer and Jennifer Magnano, two victims of domestic violence. The bill received near-unanimous support from members of the Senate. Governor Ned Lamont signed the bill into law on June 28, 2021. Jennifer's family is still deeply saddened by her passing. In a recent interview, a family spokesperson expressed their deep sorrow for Jennifer. He emphasized that her wonderful personality and optimistic spirit left a deep impression, causing even those who never met Jennifer to feel heartbroken by her disappearance. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lauren Stewart. Lauren Stewart was born on January 9, 1973. She has spent most of her life in Michigan. Lauren pursued her passions as a model and actress, attending workshops and interacting with photographers to further her career. Those who know her describe her as charming and easygoing. Lauren is passionate about her acting and modeling work. She enjoys new experiences, learning from others and sharing ideas, seeing life as an adventure and striving to live life to the fullest. Lauren is married to Daniel Stewart, a senior software architect at the University of Michigan, where he works predicting heart attacks. Prior to his current role, Daniel spent several years in the tech industry as a Coda developer. Lauren and Daniel were devout Christians in the Jehovah's Witnesses sect for a long time until 2013, when they decided to leave Christianity. Lauren and Daniel have two children, Stephen Stewart, 27, a data solutions architect and computer scientist, and Bethany Stewart, 24, a talented artist and graphic designer. At 45, Lauren seems to have the perfect life, a loving husband, well-educated children, a thriving modeling career, and a beautiful home in Keio Harbor. But deep inside, Lauren struggled with the emotional pain of being shunned and rejected by the Jehovah's Witness community she grew up in. The strict rules and practices of shunning former members took their toll on her. Lauren and Daniel's decision to leave the faith was a difficult one. The Laurens remained devout Jehovah's Witnesses until 2013, but the church's strict rules posed problems for their children's futures. Celebrating holidays was forbidden and higher education was prohibited, with the threat of expulsion for non-compliance. When Daniel asked for his children to attend university, he was warned that defying church policy would result in expulsion, which was distressing for the family as it meant complete social isolation, even from relatives. Lauren's family made the decision to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses after careful consideration. While the decision initially seemed right, they soon faced strong opposition from their community, which became unbearable, especially for Lauren. She found that even simple tasks like going shopping became difficult due to hostile looks and hurtful comments from former friends. Although these comments were not directed at her, they were said loudly enough for her to hear. Living in a small community of 3,300 residents, many of whom were Jehovah's Witnesses, Lauren's family faced a harsh reality, with prominent church members constantly reminding Lauren of her outcast status. The emotional stress eventually became too much to bear. Lauren turned to exercise to regain her health. She worked out regularly and made it her routine, which led to a dramatic change. Lauren became a fitness trainer and found success as a model. Despite being rejected by the church, Lauren appeared optimistic and confident to those around her. However, behind her pleasant exterior, Lauren was secretly struggling with chronic depression. She had been battling this condition for some time, and it had gotten worse since being ostracized by the church. As a result, Lauren often hid her true feelings behind a fake smile. Lauren's family was drowning in debt, on the brink of bankruptcy. Overwhelmed by the pressure of her own financial difficulties and emotional pain, Lauren devised a plan to solve all her problems at once. She began researching ways to end her life and videos on how to use a pistol. On February 15, 2018, Lauren left a heartbreaking note on the dining room table, meticulously cleaned the house, and sent messages to loved ones and Daniel's boss. And finally, Lauren flipped through all the family photos on her desk. Lauren texted her husband's boss at 9:24 a.m. saying that her husband Daniel had died in an accident and that she would provide more information later. However, she did not respond to her boss's subsequent messages. At 5:07 p.m. that same day, Lauren texted her cousin, saying that she was taking her family with her so they wouldn't have to suffer. She said that they would sleep until Christ was resurrected and hoped that her cousin would do better than her. Her cousin was frightened by the message and told Lauren not to harm herself or her family. Lauren had been suffering from mental health issues in recent months that her family had not known about. She had a gun and made the tragic decision to use it to kill her loved ones. Lauren's first victim was her husband, Daniel, 47, who was shot in the head while trying to escape from the basement where he was relaxing. Lauren used a pillow as a silencer to muffle the sound of the gunshot. After Daniel was shot, Lauren went upstairs to her daughter Bethany's sleeping room. Lauren shot her at point-blank range, instantly killing Bethany. Next, her son Stephen, who had his own house on the other side of town, Lauren tricked Stephen into coming to her house. When Stephen was busy with the task his mother had assigned him, his back turned, Lauren shot him at close range. The horror did not stop there. Lauren killed the family dog, placing its body in the bathtub. A neighbor heard these gunshots but thought someone was slamming the door. When the house became a cold morgue, Lauren meticulously cleaned it. Then Lauren used the gun to kill herself. Lauren's cousin, who had been trying to contact her, became concerned when she did not respond to their messages. The cousin decided to visit Lauren's home the following morning, February 16th, with a friend. When no one answered the door, they contacted the police. Upon arriving at the house, the police found the kitchen to be tidy and well organized, with a stocked refrigerator and handwritten labels on various items. A calendar was also hanging on the refrigerator. However, police discovered the family dog dead in the bathtub. This made police more cautious, initially fearing the possibility of an active shooter. As they continued to search the house, they found Stephen Stewart on the floor, shot while sitting on a chair in another room. In a bedroom, the police discovered Bethany's lifeless body, shot while she was asleep. A pillow had been used to muffle the sound of the gunshot, and the pillowcase showed signs of the shooting. The police also found Daniel Stewart's body on the basement floor in front of a couch, with his right hand still in his jeans pocket. Elsewhere in the house, Lauren was found at the foot of the stairs, with a pistol next to her and a gunshot wound between her eyes. 2 notes were discovered on the dining room table, one addressed to the medical examiner, the other a suicide note revealing Lauren's inner struggles. Lauren's note explained that she felt she had allowed evil into her heart by rejecting God's love. She believed that by killing her family, she could spare them from suffering. Through interviews with relatives, friends, and neighbors, it became clear that the couple had become reclusive after leaving the Jehovah's Witness church. Lauren's past struggles, particularly her battle with depression, were compounded by the stress of motherhood. Family members also revealed that Lauren, who who was one of 11 siblings, had a history of depression that likely contributed to her actions. Lauren has become increasingly obsessed with her faith in recent years. Her family, including her father and sister, have not spoken to her in years. Lauren's mother died when she was 13. The tragic event has left a lasting impact on those close to the family. Joyce Taylor, a longtime friend, believes the murders were a direct result of the family's rejection by the Jehovah's Witnesses. Joyce Taylor and other former members reveal the harsh reality of leaving the faith. When someone leaves the Jehovah's Witnesses, they are often shunned by their own family members who remain in the church. This severe form of shunning can take a heavy emotional toll. According to Joyce Taylor, Lauren and Daniel's desire to give their children a college education conflicted with the church's teachings, which discourage such pursuits. This clash between their aspirations and the church's rigid doctrines ultimately led to a tragic outcome. The family was shunned in every way possible. As Joyce Taylor explained, when you're raised a Jehovah's Witness, the church controls many aspects of your life, including your friendships and associations. If you go against these rules, you risk being disfellowshipped or shunned. Joyce Taylor stormed into a Kingdom Hall meeting in Union Lake, seizing the opportunity to confront the congregation about a recent tragedy. She passionately criticized the gathering, her voice filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. 5 years ago, you withdrew your support from a small family, Joyce Taylor exclaimed. They had no one else to turn to, but you turned them away and shunned them. Why? Because they wanted to raise their children as they saw fit. Just 2 days ago, 4 people died because of your alienation, Joyce Taylor said. Her words sent shockwaves through the room, forcing her to push away members of her congregation as she expressed her pent-up frustration. Police investigations into Lauren's family revealed that she, her husband, and her sons were all using cannabis. Further investigation revealed that Lauren's horrific actions were the result of a combination of factors. These included feelings of loneliness, strained relationships with family and friends due to their differing religious views. These factors combined to add to her pain, ultimately leading her to commit a horrific act. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Agnes Klavina. Agnes Klavina was born on July 8, 1984, in Riga, the capital of Latvia. She grew up in a typical family with her parents and older sister, Greta. They sisters were extremely close, with only a couple of years between them. Their parents worked hard to provide them with a good education and support their dreams. Agnes was a lively and outgoing young girl who excelled in school, enjoyed sports, and had many friends. Her dream was to pursue a career in tourism or entertainment, as she loved to travel and was skilled at organizing fun leisure activities. Her bright personality and attractive appearance also drew attention from men, who frequently complimented her. From a young age, Agnes had many admirers vying for her attention. After completing her education, Agnes worked in the service industry while taking language courses and studying to become a tourism manager. At 20, she decided to leave her hometown in Latvia and move to London, seeking greater opportunities to develop her skills and talents. Her parents and older sister supported her decision, and soon after her move, Agnes met Michael Mills, a successful businessman 8 years her senior. He was well-educated, owned a thriving business, and had recently opened a movie theater and entertainment complex. Agnes and Michael quickly connected and started dating. He showered her with attention, gifts, and luxury travel. They made ambitious plans for their future together, and their love seemed destined to last. Agnes's friends and family remember this as her first true love. She radiated happiness beside Michael and envisioned a future as his wife. In 2014, Agnes received a 3-month contract as an administrator at a popular nightclub in Marbella, Spain. This opportunity required her to temporarily relocate, but she was eager to take on the challenge. Michael, unable to leave his life behind, supported her decision to sign the contract. For Agnes, this was a chance to gain valuable experience and potentially launch a new career path. Marbella, a renowned resort on the Mediterranean coast, attracts vacationers from around the world, particularly the wealthy. It's not uncommon to spot celebrities, athletes, and business leaders in the area. Kavina, being a sociable person, enjoyed working in such a vibrant environment. Before relocating, she visited her family in Latvia and shared the news of her 3-month employment contract. She also announced her plans to marry Michael upon her return to England. Her family was thrilled for Agnes and wished her well. In May 2014, Agnes packed lightly and moved to Spain for the season, while Michael remained in London. They stayed in touch through daily phone calls and video chats, sharing updates about their lives. Agnes was active on social media, posting daily updates, photos, and videos, which drew a large following interested in her life and work. Agnes had a vibrant and busy life, making the most of every day. After her employment contract ended, she decided to stay in Spain for a couple of months. The resort was entering its peak season, and she saw an opportunity to earn a good income. She discussed her plan with her Michael, who was supportive and promised to visit her for a few days since they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Agnes quickly landed a job as a hostess at an upscale restaurant and renewed her lease. As planned, her boyfriend, Michael, visited her in September. During his visit, they had a great time, planned their upcoming wedding, and picked a destination for their honeymoon. Michael had to return to London after less than a week, leaving Agnes to work in Spain for another month. After that, she planned to visit her relatives in Latvia before flying to England to join her Michael. Unfortunately, these plans never came to fruition. Agnes went to the popular Costa del Sol nightclub with friends on September 6th. Earlier in the day, she had informed Michael of her plans and he approved. Agnes and her friends had a great time at the club, and Agnes even posted some photos on her online profile. She wore a striking mini dress and carried a small white clutch that night. As the night wore on and her friends prepared to leave, Agnes decided to stay a bit longer and then take a taxi home. Her friends didn't worry about her, as she was responsible and hadn't had much to drink. When they said their goodbyes and headed out, Agnes was chatting with a man who had bought her a drink and was trying to get her attention. After that night, Agnes disappeared without a trace. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. No one could recall what time she left the club, who she left with, or where she went afterwards. Agnes failed to show up at work the next day, and attempts to contact her were unsuccessful as her phone was turned off. Her colleagues and friends immediately raised concerns, but the police were slow to respond to the missing persons report. As the day drew to a close, a worried Michael called Agnes's mother to report that he had been unable to reach his fiancée all day, which was unusual. The following day, Agnes's parents and Michael jointly tried to contact the Spanish police to report her disappearance, but they were informed that a missing persons report could only be filed in person by a relative. Undeterred, Michael and Agnes's family booked the next available flight to Marbella. It wasn't until 5 days after Agnes's disappearance that her family was able to file a missing persons report. The investigation began with a search of Agnes's rented apartment, which appeared to be untouched, as if she had simply stepped out for a short time. Her documents, money, and expensive jewelry were still in place, the refrigerator was stocked with prepared meals, and several outfits were laid out on the bed, suggesting that Agnes had been preparing to go out, likely to the club on the night she vanished. To aid in the search, Agnes's friends and family distributed flyers with her picture throughout the city, and the media picked up the story, featuring it on TV news programs and the front pages of local newspapers. The police reviewed footage from CCTV cameras inside and outside the entertainment venue, but encountered a setback. The files had already been deleted. However, with the help of specialists, they were able to recover the recordings. One of the restored videos, taken by a camera near the parking lot exit, showed Agnes leaving the club around 6 a.m. with a man. It was clear that she did not leave voluntarily. The final footage, which showed Agnes alive, was thoroughly examined by experts. However, the more they studied the footage, the more alarming it became. Agnes was seen being led by a man to the parking lot, clearly under duress. He had a tight grip on her waist, and Agnes looked frightened. She attempted to break free multiple times and appeared to be saying something emotional, but he persisted in leading her to a Mercedes A63 with tinted windows. As he forced Agnes into the car, it became clear that another person was already inside. Meanwhile, the first man got into the driver's seat. Agnes temporarily managed to open the car door and tried to escape, but he who had been standing next to her, likely the doorman, intervened and pushed her back into the car at the driver's signal. In return for his assistance, the driver appeared to hand the doorman something, presumably a cash reward. Agnes's phone was turned off 6 minutes after she got into the car, and it was never turned back on. The vehicle's subsequent movements couldn't be tracked because there were no CCTV cameras along the route. It became clear that the men in the cabin were the last people to see Agnes before she went missing. Despite this, the case was shrouded in secrecy from the start. Everyone involved in the investigation signed confidentiality agreements, and information was kept from the press and even Agnes's loved ones. For the first few months, Agnes's parents and Michael were left in the dark, with only vague updates that the investigation was ongoing and that it was too early to draw conclusions. As time passed without any word from Agnes, hope began to dwindle. Agnes's fiancé, Michael, periodically gave interviews pleading for help in finding her, but no one ever came forward with information. It wasn't until 6 months later that Agnes's relatives were finally shown footage from the club's cameras and given the names of the 3 men who had last been in contact with her. Wesley Capper, the son of a wealthy British millionaire, was identified as he who forcibly removed Agnes from a club and pushed her into a car. Wesley Capper was accompanied by his longtime friend, Craig Porter, who had no specific occupation and had previously been on the police's radar. A third man, Cyan Usman, a dark-skinned doorman, was also in the car. Under interrogation, all 3 men claimed they were innocent, stating that Agnes had voluntarily gotten into the car. According to Wesley Capper, he and a friend had met Agnes at a club and approached her to strike up a conversation. Wesley Capper claimed that Agnes was already intoxicated, but this contradicts the testimony of her friends. He also stated that Agnes had accepted a drink from him and his friend. Capper then invited Agnes to continue the party at his luxurious country home, which she allegedly agreed to. However, Wesley Capper claims that Agnes changed her mind once they were in the car and asked to be dropped off in the middle of the road, stating that she would take a cab home. Wesley Capper claimed that he dropped Agnes off at her requested location, which was an unlit stretch of road with no CCTV cameras. Craig Porter couldn't confirm or deny Wesley Capper's statement about Agnes's presence in their car. According to Porter's own admission, he was also extremely drunk and didn't know how or when Agnes got into the vehicle. He fell asleep shortly after leaving the parking lot and only woke up to find Agnes was no longer in the car. The doorman, Cyan Usman, confirmed that Agnes was intoxicated, but he couldn't say if she voluntarily got into the car. However, he did say that when the car moved, Agnes opened the door and nearly fell out. The driver then asked him to close the door, for which he received a large tip. When questioned, Cyan Usman said he didn't think Agnes's attempt to get out of the car was an escape attempt. In his opinion, she might have accidentally opened the door due to her intoxication. He also noted that Agnes didn't scream or ask for help during the incident. The security footage clearly shows Wesley Capper forcibly leading Agnes to the car, holding her by the waist and wrist. However, Wesley's defense is that Agnes was dizzy and he was only holding her to prevent her from falling. Later in the investigation, another unsettling video came to light, shot in the south of Spain, specifically at the Puerta de la Dua in the Seu Grande Marina. The footage was of the luxury yacht belonging to John Capper, a millionaire and the father of one of the suspects. Dated September 10th, just 4 days after Agnes went missing, it showed Wesley Capper and 2 other men boarding the yacht. Notably, they carried a heavy suitcase and what appeared to be a rolled-up carpet. However, when questioned about this footage, Wesley Capper explained that he and his friends had traveled to the yacht simply to have a good time. He claimed the suitcase was packed with their belongings and what seemed to be a carpet was actually bedding. Wesley Capper failed to account for where everything had gone, considering none of these items were seen upon their return. The investigators meticulously searched the yacht and the automobile, only to find nothing of consequence because both vehicles had been thoroughly cleaned, thus destroying any possible DNA evidence. Interestingly, during this exhaustive search, a blonde hair was found in a car trunk, although determining its origin was not feasible as the hair itself had strangely disappeared over the course of the investigation, marking another puzzle within this intriguing case. A few hours after Agnes was last seen in the defendant's car, Wesley Capper made several calls to emergency services, but hung up each time without waiting for an answer. It seemed as though he was afraid or uncertain about what to do. Wesley Capper claimed he was drunk and made the calls randomly. The lawyer for the Agnes family argued that Agnes was likely already dead, and her body was probably at the bottom of the sea, hidden in the suitcase the suspects had brought on board the yacht. He also believed that the case had been intentionally delayed, giving the suspects ample time to destroy any evidence that could prove their guilt. It wasn't until a year and a half after Agnes's disappearance that Wesley Capper, Porter, and Usman were finally brought to trial. They were accused of holding Agnes against her will and forcing her into a car. Unfortunately, due to a lack of evidence, no further charges could be made. This decision outraged Agnes's relatives, but the judge stood firm. In 2019, nearly 5 years after Agnes's disappearance, the 3 men were brought to trial again. Despite the prolonged period, they continued to deny their guilt, claiming that Agnes voluntarily got into the car. The prosecutor argued that the doorman should be considered an accomplice for helping the defendants drive the victim away. The doorman, Usman, could have faced a 5-year prison sentence. Instead, he defended himself, stating that he was a suspect due to his skin color and lack of access to a good lawyer. He claimed that he sent all his earnings to a starving family in Africa. Wesley Capper and lawyers argued that their clients were only guilty of persuading Agnes to get into the car, not forcing her. They believed that Agnes was dropped off on the road as requested, but was possibly kidnapped and killed by someone else while waiting for a cab. The judge's verdict was met with surprise and anger from Agnes's relatives, as none of the defendants received any punishment. Usman was acquitted of all charges. Wesley Capper was given a 2-year sentence for taking advantage of Agnes's intoxication to coax her into his car, and Porter received a 6-month sentence for aiding Wesley Capper's actions. However, they received suspended sentences and did not serve any time in prison. Instead, they paid Agnes's family £101,000 in compensation. Agnes's family was unhappy with the outcome and decided to appeal. It later came to light that the defendants had both committed further offenses while awaiting the court's decision. Wesley Capper, who was intoxicated by alcohol and drugs at the time, hit and killed a woman with his vehicle and then fled the scene. Meanwhile, Porter and a friend, who were also intoxicated, stole a car after violently assaulting its owner. Wesley Capper received a surprisingly lenient sentence of probation for his serious crime, thanks to his lawyer's skilled defense. As part of his sentence, he paid a substantial amount of compensation to the family of she he had killed in a car accident. In contrast, Porter was not as fortunate and was sent to jail, although the exact length of his sentence is not publicly known. Nearly 7 years after Agnes's disappearance, the prime suspect in her case finally faced consequences. However, it wasn't the law that caught up with Wesley Capper, but his own destructive lifestyle. Years of substance abuse took a serious toll on his health. During the -19 pandemic, Capper was hospitalized, and after beginning to recover from the illness, he suffered a stroke. He passed away on July 26, 2021, at the age of 44. At that time, Agnes's parents appealed to the court again, but unfortunately, the suspect had since passed away and could no longer face prosecution. Despite this development, the case was still before the Supreme Court, although a new turn of events would arise 9 years later, long after Agnes's fate had been presumed, her body never found, alive or dead. Following this, her parents, sister Michael, and their lawyer converged on a plausible theory. It suggested that the perpetrators had likely disposed of Agnes's body in a suitcase that was secretly boarded on a yacht, eventually dropped in a distant, undisclosed part of the open ocean. In mid-June, a gardener at the exclusive Lida Golf Club in the Costa del Sol region discovered a mysterious object near the coast while cleaning the area. Upon closer inspection, the object turned out to be an old, badly damaged suitcase. The gardener did not attempt to open it and instead called the police. When law enforcement officers opened the suitcase, they found human remains inside. Further examination revealed that the remains belonged to she, approximately 25 to 35 years old at the time of her death. It was also determined that the suitcase had been submerged in water for around 10 years before washing up on the shore. Based on these findings, the police hypothesized that the remains might belong to Agnes, a woman who had gone missing 9 years ago. To confirm this theory, investigators are conducting DNA tests to compare Agnes's DNA with the remains found in the suitcase. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Savannah Greywind. Savannah Greywind was born on August 9, 1995, in Burke County, North Dakota, to a family with a mix of cultural backgrounds. Her father is of European American descent, while her mother is a member of the Spirit Lake Sioux Indian tribe. Savannah had 2 brothers, Joy and Casey, and a younger sister, Kayla. Her parents, Norberta and Joe, were proud of their children. The family lived in Fargo, North Dakota, until Savannah was 9 years old. Then in 2005 they moved to Spirit Lake Reservation. Savannah loves nature and animals, especially horses. It was on the reservation that she met her partner, Ashton Matheny, when she was 15 years old. They remained together as they grew older. When it was time for college, the family moved back to Fargo. Savannah found work caring for the elderly at a nursing home. She studied to become a nurse and is preparing to take her exams in September. She was expecting her first child and was excited to start her life with Ashton. They had found an apartment and planned to move in together in early September. However, at the time of her pregnancy, Savannah was staying with her parents on the bottom floor of a 7-unit, 3-story apartment building. The building was also home to Brooke Cruz, a 38-year-old woman, and her partner, William Hone, who rented an apartment on the 3rd floor. Brooke's life was deeply affected by a past marked by hardship and complexity. The experiences turned her into a dark and emotionally disturbed person. Brooke had trouble managing her emotions and behaviors, often feeling anxious and angry. Brooke's fascination with mysticism and true crime stories began at a young age. As an adult, she studied the psychology of serial killers and attempted to understand their thought processes. Her writing reflected an obsession with human nature's darker side. Brooke saw 2 conflicting forces within people, good and bad, but her own life was a testament to the destructive power of unchecked darkness. By the time Brooke was 38, struggling with depression, physical illness, and exhaustion from toxic relationships that included regular physical abuse. Her fear of losing William was exacerbated by her inability to get pregnant. This desperate situation drove Brooke to think about committing a shocking crime, taking the life of a pregnant woman to take the baby for herself. After Brooke's arrest, investigators found a disturbing collection of books and notes in her apartment. The books covered topics such as forensic psychology, obstetrics, and law. Her notes listed items for a birthing kit, including scissors, blades, clamps, gloves, and an infant CPR bag. Brooke also had a stash of oxytocin, a hormone used to induce labor. Brooke grew up in a large family in Bradenton, Florida. Her parents divorced when she was young, leaving her mother to care for 7 children, including Brooke. While her family appeared to be well off, Brooke's diary revealed a difficult childhood that she tried to forget. As she entered her teenage years, Brooke became increasingly troubled and was the only one of her siblings to move in with her father, a man her mother described as a professional criminal. After a difficult period living with her father, Brooke was passed around through various foster families, causing her to lose contact with her siblings. Years later, they would only find out that Brooke had become the mother of 7 children. In 1995, when she was 15 years old, she met Aaron Edwards. 2 years later, she gave birth to her first child in Florida but chose to leave the baby with the father and relocate. Despite a court order to pay child support, Brooke failed to meet her obligations. She would eventually reconnect with her daughter briefly on Facebook when the child turned 14. Brooke worked multiple jobs, including as a waitress at the Chinese Dragon restaurant, a sales representative, and an animal specialist at Petland in Florida. However, her life was further marked by brushes with the law. In 2002, the 23-year-old was jailed in Missouri for document falsification but was paroled on August 31, 2022. Unfortunately, her freedom was short-lived, as she was rearrested and jailed in Texas for violating her parole. By the time Brooke was 27, she married Carl Cruz, a carpenter from Minnesota, in 2006. She gave birth to 2 children and worked as an administrative assistant at her husband's carpentry shop. However, Brooke had an affair, which ultimately led to their divorce in June 2009. Carl Cruz gained custody of their children, and Brooke moved to California without explanation. The only thing she did carefully and diligently throughout her life was to keep diaries, meticulously recording events as they unfolded. After a terrible crime has occurred, the diary was published in the press. The diary told of a string of lovers, home births, and abortions. At first, many of these relationships seem healthy and loving. However, over time, the men in her life begin to control her by making her feel inferior. Brooke felt that Carl Cruz bullied and humiliated her, making her feel like a bad and promiscuous mother. Despite these negative feelings, after moving to California and filing for divorce, Brooke surprisingly returned to Carl Cruz's house. She then registered on a dating website and started taking psychology classes seriously. Brooke met Andrew Murray, a chef from Katoomba, New South Wales, Australia, on the dating site Tagged. Brooke decided to move to Australia to be with Andrew. However, before leaving, she was involved in a dispute with Carl Cruz over child custody in January 2012. During the argument, she grabbed a knife and attacked Carl Cruz. The police arrested her and charged her. Although she denied the allegations, she chose not to wait for her court hearing and instead fled to Australia using false immigration documents. Once there, she married Andrew. Andrew's marriage to Brooke lasted only 6 months. During that time, he discovered her past, including a previous husband and children in the U.S., as well as fake immigration papers. According to Andrew, Brooke threatened him for helping her, prompting him to report everything to the police as a precautionary measure. Andrew remembers their marriage as a time when Brooke became intensely interested in crime and the behaviors of serial killers. Brooke's interest in crime began as early as 2012, when she was studying psychology in nursing. Her thesis focused on serial killers, and she spent a lot of time reading about them. In total, Brooke spent 6 months and 10 days in Australia before returning to the US in October 2012. However, after returning to the US, she became embroiled in a lengthy custody battle for her 2 children. Reconciling with Andrew might have given her a chance to start over, but instead, she met William Hone, a 28-year-old man with a history of child abuse, in late 2012. Brooke fell in love with William, a man who had been divorced twice. Despite his troubled past, Brooke was optimistic about her new life. She took a job and began to rediscover herself. In 2013, Brooke decided to pursue a degree at Minnesota State University, enrolling in courses such as social behavior, psychology of deviant behavior, and research methods. She was particularly drawn to the psychology of serial killers, and her paper on the subject earned her top marks. Brooke's relationship with William was loving and kind at first, creating a peaceful home for their children. However, over time, the relationship became codependent, marked by joint substance abuse, and the problem is getting more and more tense. As Brooke's relationship deteriorated, her well-being suffered. She began to withdraw from her children, struggled in her job, and became increasingly fixated on her research into the darker aspects of human psychology. In 2014, Brooke's life and spirit changed dramatically after a series of terrible things happened to her. The specifics of these things are not disclosed, but they appear to have had a profound and lasting impact on her mental health. Brooke suffered a panic attack and was rushed to the hospital, where she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. In the following year, Brooke's relationship with William began to deteriorate. She expressed her feelings of emptiness in her diary. She felt neglected, which led to her starting to isolate herself from others. Brooke's physical and mental health continued to decline, and she was eventually diagnosed with a gallbladder disease. This led to a significant decline in her overall well-being, causing her to become reclusive and rarely leave her house. The situation took a turn for the worse when Brooke's partner, William, became violent. In May 2016, the police responded to a call and found that William had brutally beaten Brooke in the bathroom. He pleaded guilty to assault and was banned from approaching her. However, he failed to comply with the restraining order and was found in Brooke's apartment 6 months later. The relationship between Brooke and William continued, but it was no longer healthy. However, one issue remained: William wanted a child, while Brooke was unable to have one due to a 2011 abortion. In 2017, after a fight, Brooke fabricated a pregnancy to prevent William from leaving her. To convince him, she sent him fake proof, including a false ultrasound picture and a photo of a positive pregnancy test. Brooke found an online recording of a random baby's heartbeat and presented it to William, claiming it was the heartbeat of the child she carrying. In reality, there was no pregnancy. William had already shared with friends and family that Brooke was pregnant, and in an attempt to save face, he pressured her to actually have the baby. Brooke understood William's statement as a final decision and thought he was insisting that they adopt a child from someone else, specifically their pregnant neighbor Savannah, who lived 3 floors below them. Brooke, who had medical knowledge, began making a list of what she needed to induce labor. One Saturday afternoon in August, Brooke deceived Savannah by offering her $20 to model a dress, claiming it was one she was currently sewing. Savannah agrees and goes to Brooke's apartment, unaware of Brooke's true intentions. Meanwhile, Savannah had ordered a pizza, expecting to eat it when she returned home. Savannah did not return home at the expected time. The brother went upstairs to the apartment Brooke's around 2:30 p.m. and heard the sound of a sewing machine, but no one answered the door. A short while later, Savannah's father, Joe, also went upstairs and knocked on the door. Brooke, who was with Savannah, yelled out that they were still working on a dress and that Savannah was trying it on, which is why they couldn't open the door. When Norberta returned home, she found that the pizza was untouched. She texted her daughter several times but received no response. She then went upstairs to the apartment, where a neighbor informed her that Savannah had left a while ago after finishing her dress fitting. Norberta became anxious and searched her apartment. Finding that Savannah's shoes, purse, car keys, and other belongings were still there. Savannah had been experiencing heat and swelling that made it painful and difficult for her to walk, so it was unlikely that she had gone for a walk. Norberta called Ashton Matheny, hoping that he might have picked up Savannah, but he replied that he hadn't heard from her either. Growing increasingly worried, Norberta called the police and began driving around the neighborhood, searching for her pregnant daughter. Norberta was driving and thought that if Savannah had gone out, Norberta would have found her nearby. Later that day, the police searched Brooke and William's apartment because it was the last place Savannah was seen. They allowed the police to enter and didn't interfere, but since the police didn't have a warrant, they didn't check inside closets or behind closed doors. The police informed Savannah's family that since she was considered an adult, she had the right to make her own choices. They also stated that without evidence of a crime, there was no requirement for them to keep the family updated on her situation. The investigators concluded that Savannah had left voluntarily. However, Savannah's family was upset by the police department's apparent indifference to her disappearance. The police searched the apartment 2 more times but found nothing. Later, William would admit that he hid Savannah infant in a suitcase and Savannah's body in a dresser with the shelves removed. 2 days after Savannah's murder, William and Brooke drove to a bridge over the Red River, carrying the dresser with Savannah's body, and dumped it into the water. On August 23, 2017, William's co-workers reported to police that he had mentioned having a baby at home. Around the same time, residents of the apartment building where Williams lived hearing a baby crying from apartment number 5, prompting them to notify the police. With this new information, officers obtained a warrant and conducted a thorough search of the apartment, where they found a live newborn baby girl. Brooke later revealed that Savannah had given her the baby. According to Brooke, Savannah had given birth to the baby just 2 days after she went missing. Savannah had confided in Brooke that she didn't want the baby and had asked for Brooke help in inducing labor. 2 days later, at 3 a.m., Savannah arrived at Brooke's home with the baby in her arms and handed the infant over to her. After Savannah was reported missing, the police took her baby into temporary custody. A few days later, a DNA test confirmed the baby's parentage, and Savannah's daughter was reunited with her father for 3 more days. The police and hundreds of local residents conducted a thorough search of the area. The police asked residents to carefully check their properties, including vacant apartments, dumpsters, and any other hiding for evidence. At a press conference on August 27, the police chief urged the public to help find Savannah. However, just a day later, a fisherman found her body wrapped in plastic on the Red River near Harwood. Savannah was identified by a tattoo on her leg. The police charged Brooke Cruz and William Home with conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to kidnap, and providing false information. They admitted to the incident, with Brooke explaining that she initiated the fight by accusing Savannah of taking her cat without permission and mistreating it. The argument turned physical, and Brooke pushed Savannah, who fell and hit her head on the bathroom sink, losing consciousness. Brooke used a knife to remove the baby from Savannah, making a cut from hip to hip. As she did this, Savannah went consciousness. When questioned, Brooke confirmed that William was not aware of the plan beforehand. According to Brooke, William came home, entered the bathroom, and saw Savannah. He asked if Savannah was alive, and Brooke replied that she didn't know. William then left the bathroom briefly, returning in his underwear with a rope. He used the rope to strangle Savannah. After the murder, Brooke and William cleaned the floor and walls. Then stuffed Savannah's body into a bathroom closet. When the police arrived, Brooke attempted to remain calm. The officers searched the apartment, but their search was superficial due to the lack of a search warrant. As a result, they did not look in closets or dressers. According to Brooke, the child was under a blanket on the bed next to William during the searches. The child was calm and did not cry, so the child was not discovered. By the time of the third inspection on August 20th, Savannah's body had been moved to a dresser, and the infant was hidden in a suitcase. On August 21st, Brooke and William disposed of a dresser by taking it down the stairs, loading it into their Jeep Cherokee, and driving it to the river. William denied participating in the crime, but admitted to hiding a newborn baby girl and providing false information to police to cover up the crime. Both Brooke and William were set a bail of $2 million, which William thought was an unrealistic amount. Brooke was later sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although William's participation in the crime was not proven during the trial, he was found guilty of kidnapping and sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty. A cellmate of Brooke's, Jennifer Robinson, testified against Brooke, claiming that Brooke had confessed to strangling Savannah with a rope after discovering Savannah's affair with William. In May 2019, William was sent to prison. On October 7, 2019, he appealed to the Supreme Court. After a review of his sentence, Judge Olin, who had originally given William a life sentence, decided to give him the longest possible sentence allowed at the time, which was 20 years in prison. Since William had already spent 775 days in prison, he would have to serve more than 7 additional years. Savannah's baby, Hasley, is now 6 years old and attending kindergarten. The Savannah's parents regularly post updates on their public Facebook page about their granddaughter's life. The case has received significant attention, and Norberta believes that her daughter's disappearance was not taken seriously because Savannah was Native American. She thinks that if Savannah were white, her disappearance would have been treated more seriously. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Luz Maria Lopez. Luz Maria Lopez was born on March 17, 1995, in San Cristobal, Verapaz, a small town, to a modest family. She was the youngest of 2 children. Her parents, Al Morales and Brian, raised her along with her older brother, Omar. Luz Maria's early life was marked by a serious health scare. As an infant, she nearly died due to an intestinal obstruction and underwent a complex surgery. Although her doctors were uncertain about her chances of recovery, her mother's prayers and faith played a significant role in Luz Maria's survival. Fortunately, the surgery did not affect Luz Maria's development. She grew up to be a healthy and active child. During her school years, Luz Maria was a sporty. She was actively involved in gymnastics, athletics, and classical dance. She easily makes friends with everyone and got along with people from different backgrounds. Luz Maria excelled academically, particularly in the humanities. After completing her secondary education, Luz Maria decided to pursue higher education at a prestigious state university. She chose to study law and later specialized in criminalistics, a field that had always fascinated her. A fateful encounter took place when Luz Maria accompanied her mother to a car dealership in Coban, the capital of Alta Verapaz. The occasion was her older brother's 25th birthday, and the family wanted to surprise him with a motorcycle he had always desired. Inside the dealership, they were warmly greeted by a courteous and attentive young sales consultant named Jorge, who showcased the available models, offering some advice. Although Luz Maria and her mother have already chosen a model, but they want to consider and discuss it with her father before making a decision to buy it. As they left, they took a business card from the dealership and Luz Maria left her phone number for further communication. Shortly after, she received a call from Jorge himself, but instead of discussing the potential purchase, the conversation turned to a more personal subject. Over the following days, Jorge contacted Luz Maria several times, gradually building up the courage to invite her to meet at a coffee shop. Jorge was clearly smitten with Luz Maria, the beautiful, sultry brunette, but he didn't know how to approach her. Luckily, Luz Maria also liked Jorge, and when he asked to meet, she happily agreed. Although Luz Maria was a year younger, their small age difference wasn't an issue. They fell deeply in love, both believing it was love at first sight, and that a long, happy life was ahead. A few short months into their relationship, they decided to live together, despite parental objections. They had a small, private wedding, attended only by close friends and family. However, their special day almost got derailed due to a mishap at the banquet venue. They had to cough up extra cash to save the celebration, which wedding ultimately took place on schedule. Jorge was born in 1996 in Santa Catalina Latina, a town in central Guatemala. Jorge and his younger brother, Pablo, grew up in a low-income household. His family struggled financially, so as children, they did not have the luxury of fine clothes and expensive toys, as the family's limited income only covered the most basic needs. Even though Jorge grew up in difficult circumstances, he seemed to have no motivation to change his life for the better. He lived life at his own pace, choosing to enjoy simple pleasures rather than strive for advanced degrees or job security. Those who knew Jorge described him as introverted, unsociable, and having few close relationships, especially with women. When he met the love of his life, Luz Maria, he went all out to win her heart and quickly proposed, fearing she might change her mind. However, Luz Maria's parents, Morales and Brian, were suspicious of him from the start. They couldn't quite put their finger on what it was about him that they didn't like, but they couldn't convince their daughter to call off the wedding. The marriage turned out to be unhappy. After the wedding, Luz Maria became pregnant, but she had not yet finished her university degree and struggled to find a good job. Due to her lack of experience and health issues, she had to accept short-term, low-skilled jobs. Meanwhile, her husband lost his job and was in no hurry to find a new one. When their daughter, Alice, was born, the family's financial situation became more difficult. Both spouses were unemployed, and they had no money to pay rent, buy food, or pay for the family's basic needs. Jorge convinced Luz Maria that their only option was to temporarily move in with his parents. Luz Maria was initially hesitant, but facing no alternative and having a baby to care for, she eventually gave her consent. Luz Maria's mother was aware of the problems her daughter was facing in her marriage, but despite mother concerns, Luz Maria was optimistic that things would improve. Luz Maria assured her mother that everything would get better soon, so her mother decided to visit her and see how she was doing. However, when she went to Luz Maria's husband's house to see her daughter, she was shocked by what she found. Luz Maria was in a terrible state, eating only once a day and very little at that. This was partly due to Jorge's family not providing her with enough food, even though she was unemployed and breastfeeding her young daughter. The lack of food was only one of many problems Luz Maria faced in her in-laws' home. She was constantly belittled and even physically abused by her husband's younger brother. He was annoyed by the sound of the baby crying and the presence of children's belongings in the house. On several occasions, he threw items at Luz Maria, including a baby bottle that hit her and her daughter, Alice, who was in her arms. Despite witnessing these events, Jorge just stood by and did nothing to protect his wife and children, he treating them as if they were strangers. Morales convinces her daughter to take her granddaughter to her maternal home. Jorge arrived shortly afterwards, asking his wife to return home and promising to find a job. Luz Maria agreed, on the condition that they could rent their own apartment and live separately from Jorge's parents. After completing her education and defending her diploma, Luz Maria landed her dream job at the city prosecutor's office. As a smart, talented, and responsible young woman, she quickly earned the respect of her colleagues and began to advance in her career. As time passed, the family's financial situation significantly improved, thanks to Luz Maria's hard work and success. They were eventually able to afford a car. Meanwhile, Jorge continued to struggle with his own life, failing to find direction and instead relying on his wife's income. His laziness and jealousy intensified over time, causing tension in the household. Jorge had a volatile temper, and the situation worsened with time. Jorge was a man who preferred a life of leisure, spending most of his time at home watching TV, drinking beer with friends, and relying on his wife's income. He was extremely possessive and controlling, restricting his wife's freedom and autonomy. He wouldn't allow her to make friends, have lunch with colleagues, or even be alone without him. He constantly monitored her phone activity, checked her call history, and read her messages. He also forbade her from creating social media accounts. When they were alone at home, Jorge's behavior was just as bad. He frequently arguments, blamed his wife for all their problems, and never took responsibility for his actions. When they lived with his parents, Jorge failed to stand up for his wife, instead watching as she was humiliated, insulted, and even physically abused by his relatives. Jorge frequently resorted to physical violence in their relationship. He had a controlling attitude towards his wife, Luz Maria, and wrongly believed she would accept his abusive treatment. Their neighbors frequently heard screams coming from their house and witnessed signs of physical abuse on Luz Maria's face and body. Luz Maria had tried to leave her husband multiple times, taking their daughter and moving in with her parents. However, her husband would always show up, beg for forgiveness on his knees, and promise to change. Despite her parents' warnings to leave him, Luz Maria would forgive her husband and give him another chance. On December 15, 2020, after another violent argument, Luz Maria took their 3-year-old daughter, Alice, fled to her mother's house in tears. The next day, Jorge arrived, but it was unclear whether he was seeking reconciliation with his wife or just wanted his car back. He claimed to have found a new job and promised that their lives would improve, swearing that he would never physically harm Luz Maria again. Luz Maria believed him once more and returned to their rented apartment with her husband. In January 2021, Jorge failed to get a job as promised and stole the money Luz Maria had earned, leaving their family with nothing. Luz Maria called her mother to complain, and her mother agreed to meet with her to give her some money until she received her next salary. However, on January 19th, Luz Maria failed to show up and was unreachable by phone, which was unusual for her. Concerned for her daughter's well-being, Morales went to Luz Maria's workplace the next day and found that she had not shown up for 2 consecutive days and had not been in contact with anyone. Around the same time, Jorge was also looking for Luz Maria. He went to the prosecutor's office claiming they had a fight and assuming she had gone to her mother's house. However, Morales suspected that he was lying and immediately went to the police to report Luz Maria missing. That same day, a nationwide alert system was launched under the codename Isabel Claudina. This system was originally designed to facilitate urgent searches for missing young women. When the massive search began, her husband, Jorge, was immediately identified as the lead suspect. In fact, he was the only suspect. Luz Maria had no enemies, and there was no reason to believe she had been kidnapped. The last person to see her alive was Jorge himself. Jorge denied any involvement in Luz Maria's disappearance, claiming he had been searching for her and was outraged to be considered a suspect. Jorge's story had several holes in it, and he couldn't give a clear reason for not telling the police about his wife's disappearance on the same day it happened. If Jorge thought Luz Maria was at her mother's house, it wasn't clear why he didn't call or visit her there. On January 22nd, municipal workers stumbled upon the body of Luz Maria Lopez while responding to a clogged storm drain near the road. When they lifted the grate, they found the large plastic bag containing charred human remains. The workers immediately reported the discovery to the police, suspected that the body might be that of Luz Maria. Forensic experts confirmed that the remains belonged to she, and Luz Maria's parents and brother identified the body despite its severe disfigurement from fire. Notably, the body was found on the same street as the prosecutor's office where Luz Maria worked. Despite the body's severe burns, pathologists determined that Luz Maria had been severely beaten and died from asphyxia. Evidence of internal hemorrhages, fractures sustained while she was still alive, and caked blood in her nose and mouth supported this conclusion. Deep marks on her neck also indicated strangulation. At the time of the discovery of the body, no new suspects had emerged. Luz Maria's parents were convinced that their son-in-law, Jorge, was responsible for the brutal murder of their daughter. As a result, Jorge was immediately taken into custody, and investigators began to look into the motive behind the crime. Experts in psychology and criminal behavior were consulted to examine the relationships within the family and the marriage. During the investigation, Luz Maria's mother, Morales, provided an audio recording that had been sent to her anonymously by a neighbor who had witnessed their frequent arguments. The recording captured a heated argument between they, in which Luz Maria frantically screams and cries for help, accompanied by the faint sounds of a child crying in the background. Morales was deeply shocked and extremely upset by the news. She emphasized that if the witness had immediately contacted the police, her daughter might still be alive. The witness did not call the police or even visit the house where the screams originated. The police were unable to locate the anonymous person, which meant they could not be officially involved in the investigation. During an interview, Morales urged citizens to be vigilant and report instances of domestic violence to the police rather than simply documenting them. She believed that such actions could help save lives. The crime sparked widespread outrage, prompting thousands of people to take to the streets and demand justice for Luz Maria. Jorge was taken into custody, but he continued to deny his involvement, claiming he had driven his wife to work on the day she disappeared. Security footage did show their car heading in the direction of her workplace. But the tinted windows made it impossible to determine how many people were inside. Additionally, no footage showed the car stopping or Luz Maria getting out. At the house they was renting, police discovered evidence of a violent incident. There were faint blood stains and drag marks, suggesting that this was where the brutal attack had occurred. Further evidence was discovered in the trunk of the family car, where microscopic fragments of burnt human flesh were found. The investigators also became interested in a recent purchase made by a double orthopedic mattress. Specifically, they were interested in the dense polyethylene wrapping that came with the mattress. A comparative analysis revealed that Jorge had used this wrapping to package the burnt remains of Luz Maria. Additionally, several neighbors came forward as witnesses, reporting that they had frequently heard Jorge yelling at his wife and threatening to kill her. Just days before Luz Maria's disappearance, Jorge had been overheard shouting that he would kill her if she tried to leave him, and that he would hide her body so well that no one would ever find it. Criminologists used collected data and witness testimony to reconstruct the events surrounding the crime. On the night of January 19, 2021, a brutal murder took place. The day before, Luz Maria and her husband, Jorge, had a violent argument. Jorge physically assaulted her. On this occasion, his rage escalated, causing him to strike his wife multiple times. Her screams for help were heard by the neighbors, but they failed to report the incident to the authorities. The beating left Luz Maria with a broken nose and a head injury. Jorge then strangled her with his bare hands. In an attempt to dispose of the body, he dragged it to the backyard, doused it with flammable liquid, and set it on fire. However, the fire produced a significant amount of smoke and a strong odor, which Jorge feared would attract the attention of the neighbors. He quickly extinguished the flames, wrapped the charred remains in plastic, and sought a secluded location to hide the body. he believing it would never be discovered. Jorge committed a heinous crime in front of his 3.5-year-old daughter, who was old enough to partially understand what was happening. The child witnessed the beating and crime, and her cries and screams were recorded. Despite this, Jorge attempted to cover his tracks by using his knowledge of forensics, gained from his wife's textbooks, to create an alibi. He disposed of her body in a drainage sewer on a poorly lit road with no surveillance cameras. The next morning, Jorge drove to his wife's workplace, pretending to have taken her there as usual. He then began a fake search for her, contacting her colleagues, friends, and family. During the trial, Jorge's lawyers delayed proceedings and attempted to mislead the investigation. They claimed that all the evidence and witness statements were indirect and did not directly prove Jorge's guilt. Defense attorneys requested that Jorge's detention be changed to house arrest, arguing that he was deeply depressed due to the accusations of killing Luz Maria he loved and the mother of his child. However, the crucial evidence came from Luz Maria's phone, which was in Jorge's possession. On the day after the crime, he sent multiple messages from her phone to different people, attempting to make people believe that Luz Maria was still alive. An analysis of the phone's movements revealed that it was consistently in the same locations as Jorge's phone. The defense team attempted to spin this evidence in their favor, claiming that Jorge had found his wife's phone and was driving around the city with it while searching for her. However, they failed to explain why Jorge was sending messages from her phone. Furthermore, bruises and scratches on Jorge's body, which were documented by experts through photographs, suggested that Luz Maria had put up a struggle. The most noticeable injury on Jorge was a scratch on his neck. However, investigators were unable to find Jorge's skin cells under Luz Maria's fingernails. Despite several questionable points in the case, the prosecutor pushed for the maximum possible sentence. The defendant was found guilty of brutally murdering his wife in October 2022. Jorge was sentenced to 50 years in prison, despite maintaining his innocence. Custody of their young daughter, Alice, was awarded to her maternal grandparents. The grandparents expressed that their granddaughter had given their lives new. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Fusako Sano. Nobuyuki was born on July 15, 1962, in the Japanese prefecture of Niigata. He grew up in a wealthy family. His family's business, related to passenger transportation, was very successful, thanks to his 62-year-old father. Nobuyuki was a late child, with 5 half-siblings from his father's previous marriage. However, he is not really close to them. As a result, he grew up to be a spoiled and demanding child who always expected to get his own way, immediately. Nobuyuki often becomes aggressive when his expectations are not met in a timely manner. One notable incident occurred. He threw a tantrum in a store, punching his mother when she refused to buy him another toy. Nobuyuki struggled to form relationships with his peers due to his complicated and sometimes unusual behavior. He was also self-conscious about his height, which often caused him to hunch over. This behavior caused his classmates to tease him and give him unflattering nicknames. Despite this, Nobuyuki's family resided in a luxurious 2-story European-style house, which featured a spacious room specifically designed for him. The boy was uncomfortable in the room, fidgeting and expressing fear of being alone. This behavior led his parents to take him to see a doctor. After an initial review, he was referred to a psychiatrist who diagnosed him with multiple disorders, a fear of the dark, a fear of germs and dirt, and a unique of autophobia, fear of loneliness, sociophobia, anxiety related to social interactions. Essentially, he feared both being alone and being around others. As a result, he became a loner in high school, never forming close relationships with classmates, and never having a girlfriend despite his attractive appearance. His peers avoided him, and he became an outcast. The only people he felt comfortable expressing his anger and frustration to were his elderly parents, who forgave him and tried to calm him down with gifts and money. As an adult, he struggled to hold down a job. He frequently got into conflicts with colleagues, neglected his responsibilities, and would often leave work in the middle of the day for no good reason, such as when it was raining and he felt sad. On one occasion, he intentionally hurt a female coworker, likely trying to get her attention out of sympathy. Although the incident was attributed to an accident, he was fired immediately. After being fired, Nobuyuki became unemployed and relied on his parents' financial support. Over time, he became increasingly reclusive, rarely leaving his room, and frequently clashed with his parents. Following a particularly intense quarrel, Nobuyuki started a fire in his home, nearly destroying the house and putting its occupants in harm's way. Nobuyuki was later admitted to a psychiatric clinic for treatment, where he was diagnosed with a depressive disorder, uncontrollable outbursts of aggression, and signs of misogyny, extreme dislike and hatred of women. After a little over a month of treatment, he was discharged, deemed not to pose an immediate threat to others. For a brief period, Nobuyuki remained calm and even began rebuilding the partially burned house, adding a couple of new rooms. However, his efforts were short-lived, and he eventually abandoned the construction project. Nobuyuki became increasingly withdrawn and isolated. He spent most of his time in his room, watching TV. He not only forbade his parents from entering his room, but also the second floor of the house. If they tried to cross this boundary, he would violently lash out at them, punching and threatening to kill them. In the spring of 1989, Nobuyuki began taking walks, but he preferred to stroll near a local school where he could secretly watch the female students. At first, he kept his distance and tried not to communicate with anyone. However, one day, he suddenly grabbed a young girl, who was only 9 years old, and threw her over his shoulder as she was leaving the school gate. He then ran to his car, which was parked nearby. The other children immediately screamed for help, and a school security guard and bystanders quickly intervened, rescuing she and detaining Nobuyuki until the police arrived. Nobuyuki was unable to explain why he attacked she, and it was clear that he had intended to commit a violent and unlawful act against a minor. As a result, he was charged with attempting to commit a violent crime against a child. Nobuyuki Sato avoided a long prison sentence thanks to his father's connections and wealth. In August, Nobuyuki was given a year's probation despite his heinous crime. Shortly thereafter, his name was mysteriously removed from the criminal prosecution database, allegedly due to his father's intervention. However, Nobuyuki's father died shortly after his son's case, dying of a heart attack. Nobuyuki was left with overwhelming shame and guilt for his father's sacrifices and efforts to cover up his crime. After the failure of his first kidnapping attempt, Nobuyuki, 28 years old, tried again a year and a half later. This time, he carefully planned the crime and remained under the police radar for an extended period. On November 13, 1990, Nobuyuki set out on a hunting trip around the city. In the evening, as darkness fell, he spotted 9-year-old Fusako Sano, who had stayed late after school due to a sports event, walking alone on a deserted road. Nobuyuki quickly pulled over in front of her, got out of the car with a knife, and grabbed Fusako. He threatened to slit her throat if she tried to scream or run away. Then, he forced her into the trunk of the car. After driving for a while, he turned into a vacant lot, where he tied Fusako's hands and feet and covered her mouth with tape. When night fell, Nobuyuki drove to his house and took Fusako out of the trunk. Nobuyuki led her through a part of the house that was still under construction to his room, trying not to be seen. He then left the room and re-entered through the front door, as if everything was normal. Once upstairs, Nobuyuki again threatened Fusako with the knife, ordering her to be quiet. He tied her to the bed and warned her that if she tried to leave the room, look out the window, scream, or cry, he would kill her and dispose of her body in the ocean, where no one would ever find it. Fusako was terrified and obeyed the kidnapper's orders, hoping that he would eventually take pity on her and let her go. When Fusako didn't return home from school, her parents started to worry. They knew she had stayed late to watch a baseball game, but as the sun began to set, they expected her to be home by then. Initially, Fusako's parents tried to find their daughter on their own, retracing her usual route from school to home, but their efforts were unsuccessful. As night drew closer, the parents of Fusako turned to the police for help, hoping for a quick resolution. Since Fusako's disappearance, only a few hours had passed, and they were anxious to find her. The police launched a search operation. And by the next morning, they were joined by dozens of volunteers from the local community. The following day, the search party grew to over 200 people, who combed the area, distributed flyers with Fusako's photo, and interviewed passers-by in search of witnesses. Notably, Nobuyuki lived close to Fusako's school and the police station. He had previously attempted to kidnap Fusako, which had brought him to the attention of the police. However, despite this, Nobuyuki was not considered a suspect in the case, thanks to the efforts of his late father. A large-scale search operation was initiated to locate Fusako Sano, a Japanese schoolgirl who had disappeared. The search lasted for many months, covering numerous locations such as empty buildings, houses, railroad cars, and vacant lots. Investigators also searched suspicious vehicles and combed through interstate highways, but found no clues. As the investigation continued, authorities considered various theories, including the possibility of involvement by North Korean special services. However, despite their efforts, the search was unsuccessful, and Fusako remained missing. Fusako later revealed that she was terrified during her captivity and followed Nobuyuki's instructions in the hope that he would eventually release her. However, her captor, Nobuyuki, had no intention of letting her go. For several months, he kept her bound with tight restraints that impaired her blood flow and caused her to lose sensation in her limbs. If she disobeyed or made a sound, he would punish her with a stun gun, beat her, or threaten her with a knife. Notably, Nobuyuki never assaulted Fusako in a sexual manner during her captivity. Instead, he treated her more like a possession or a pet, using her as a means of companionship and conversation. Nobuyuki kept Fusako captive, feeding her a meager diet of food prepared by his mother. As a result, Fusako became severely malnourished and weakened. He restricted her to her bed, forcing her to use plastic bags as a toilet, which he would then dispose of in an unfinished part of the house. Once a month, he would bathe her in a basin, cut her hair and nails, and dress her in his own worn-out clothes. Despite her compliance, Nobuyuki would regularly beat her for his own amusement. Over time, Fusako's spirit was broken, and she became submissive, no longer attempting to escape or even look out the window. As the years passed, Nobuyuki stopped bothering to physically restrain Fusako, and didn't even think to lock the door when he stepped out. He would simply cover her with blankets or towels. Occasionally, he would turn on the radio or watch TV with her, but only to programs that interested him, such as Scottish or sports matches. He also brought her comic books, which he enjoyed himself. These were the only things Fusako had to read during her confinement. For nearly a decade, Fusako was isolated, never speaking to anyone else or leaving her room. She remained in bed most of the time, hardly moving or trying to resist her situation. Fusako had become so resigned to her fate that she no longer attempted to escape or call for help. Nobuyuki's mother lived in fear of her son's violence. For years, she had avoided the second-floor room because Nobuyuki had threatened her with violence. This was not an idle warning, as Nobuyuki actually pushed her down the stairs when she tried to enter the room. She retired in 1996 at the age of 73, and her circumstances became extremely difficult. Nobuyuki regularly abused her, forcing her to follow his rules. Desperate for help, she went to the police in the spring of 1996 and filed a report, stating that she was a victim of domestic violence at the hands of her son. However, the police seemed reluctant to intervene and persuaded her to withdraw her statement, advising her to handle the situation on her own. She also sought help from a public health center, complaining about her son's aggressive behavior and requesting that he be hospitalized for psychiatric evaluation. Her concerns were ignored and she was told her son's actions were not worth worrying about. Instead, she was advised to encourage him to seek help voluntarily. In January 2000, the elderly woman, exhausted from years of physical and emotional abuse, made a desperate call for help. She contacted the hospital and the police, requesting that they send the medical team and officers to her home. Her reason for calling was that her son, Nobuyuki, had brutally beaten her again, tied her up, and used a taser on her multiple times. Authorities finally responded to she's pleas for help and arrived at her house. When the ambulance and police car appeared, Nobuyuki became visibly agitated, aggressive, and resistant. He had to be restrained with handcuffs and sedated with a large dose of medication. Nobuyuki's mother confessed to the authorities that she lived in fear of her son, whose behavior had become increasingly aggressive and uncontrollable. She also revealed that she had not been allowed to access the second floor of her home for years, as Nobuyuki had forbidden it, threatening to kill her if she disobeyed. Upon entering the second floor and Nobuyuki's room, the police made a shocking discovery. A pile of blankets on the bed moved slightly, and when the officers peeled them back, they found a thin, pale, and exhausted girl hiding underneath. When questioned, she identified herself and revealed that she had been kidnapped by Nobuyuki while walking home from school a long time ago. After the discovery, the police brought Nobuyuki's mother into the room to ask if she knew the captive girl. However, she was shocked and claimed she had no idea that anyone else lived in the house besides her and her son. The kidnapped girl also claimed that she had never seen she before. During questioning, Nobuyuki made a shocking confession. He recalled the day he saw Fusako on the road and thought she was cute, so he decided to take her home with him. According to Nobuyuki, he took care of Fusako, feeding her, washing her, dressing her, and reading her comic books. He only punished her when she disobeyed him. Nobuyuki also admitted that he loved Fusako like a friend and believed she felt the same way about him. He had no intention of letting her go and hoped she would stay with him forever. He enjoyed spending time with her, talking to her for hours about soccer, music, or his favorite comic book characters, and she would listen silently. Nobuyuki claimed that he never locked his bedroom door, but Fusako never tried to escape, which led him to believe that she was happy living with him. A medical examination concluded that despite his mental disorder, Nobuyuki was able to understand his actions and thus was eligible to stand trial. However, questions were raised about whether his mother could be held accountable as an accomplice. She often bought feminine hygiene products for her son, which raised suspicions. Despite her repeated efforts to alert authorities and get medical help for her family, her concerns were consistently disregarded. The case drew widespread attention before the trial even began, the city police facing heavy criticism. Nobuyuki had previously been prosecuted for attempting to kidnap a schoolgirl. But he had managed to avoid suspicion when he carried out his plan. As a result, the local police chief and the head of the regional police department were removed from their posts for failing to control the situation from the start and making numerous mistakes. Nobuyuki Sato went on trial in May 2000. The prosecution thoroughly examined every detail of his actions, including minor offenses. Nobuyuki was found guilty and sentenced to 14 years in prison, the maximum term. He was released in the spring of 2015 after serving his sentence. By then, his mother had passed away in a nursing home, and Nobuyuki had no other relatives. He was found dead about a year and a half later, in early 2017 in a small rented room. The cause of his death was not disclosed. When Fusako was discovered, she was extremely weak and could barely stand. Doctors diagnosed her with exhaustion, dehydration, and muscle atrophy. She also stuttered, was afraid of sunlight, and had lost most of her communication skills. Her parents didn't even recognize their daughter when they saw her after nearly a decade. It took Fusako about a year to recover physically, but her mental health took much longer to heal. She suffered from severe post-traumatic stress disorder and became withdrawn, avoiding people. Her intelligence was also affected, remaining at the level of a 9-10 years old child. Her parents took her out of town, changed her name to Sachiko Yamada, and refused to speak to the press. Over time, Sachiko made friends, took up photography, and even passed her driver's license test. In 2007, a family outing took a devastating turn when her father accidentally drowned in a pond she tragically witnessed. Back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Patrick de la Cerda. Patrick de la Cerda was born in June 1992 in Miami, Florida, a city known for its picturesque metropolitan area. His father, Max Dira, was a native of Spain, while his mother, Patricia Ranza, was born and raised in France before moving to the United States in the 1980s, where she met and married Max. Patrick grew up in a warm family environment where he was surrounded by love, care, and mutual respect. He was a kind, intelligent, and sociable person who excelled in school and had a large circle of friends. From a young age, Patrick was very close to his parents, who prioritized his education and well-being, providing him with every opportunity to grow into a capable and responsible individual. Patrick's father was a dedicated and skilled professional in the construction industry. Although the family was not wealthy, they were considered well off by the standards of the big city. After completing high school, Patrick decided to follow in his father's footsteps and pursue a degree in construction. However, during his time at university, his parents made the difficult decision to divorce after nearly 25 years of marriage. The divorce of Patrick's parents was a quiet and peaceful one, with no scandals or disputes over property. After the separation, his mother moved to Deltona, a small town on the east coast of the state, where she eventually remarried. Patrick, on the other hand, chose to stay with his father in Miami, where they worked together in the construction industry and were highly respected. Despite the divorce, the family remained very close, and all members maintained a friendly relationship with one another. The family continued to stay in touch, regularly calling and communicating with each other. They were always willing to lend a helping hand when needed. Patrick often visited his mother in Deltona and shared with her details of his life, including his relationships and romantic interests. With his French and Spanish heritage, Patrick had grown up to be a charming and attractive young man, which helped him win over women at a relatively young age. Patrick grew up in a family that valued strong relationships, so he never sought casual flings. Instead, he dreams of finding lasting love, living peacefully, and building a lifelong family with someone special. He created a profile on a popular dating website at the suggestion of a friend, but he didn't have high hopes of actually meeting his soul mate on the dating website. One June evening in 2017, Patrick half-heartedly scrolled through profiles of women on the site. Then, he came across a photo that caught his attention, a stunning brunette with an unforgettable appearance, big, expressive eyes, and a charming smile. Patrick was immediately smitten and decided to send her a message. She replied, much to his delight, and they easily fell into a comfortable conversation. Jessica Devnani was born in 1988 in Orlando, Florida. After high school, she attended a local university where she studied banking. Following graduation, she landed a job at a bank branch in her hometown. Around that time, she met a handsome young man online. They quickly hit it off, exchanging messages and eventually phone numbers. They had long conversations every day, creating a deep emotional bond and strong trust. As their online friendship grew, they decided to meet in person. Since they lived in different parts of the state, they chose a meet-up spot roughly equidistant from each other. On their first date, Patrick knew he had found the person he had been searching for, and he didn't want to let her go. Jessica felt the same way about him. However, Jessica was slightly taken aback by their age difference. She was 4 years older than Patrick. After their date, on his way home, Patrick called his mother to tell her what happened. They had been in a long-distance relationship for months, which was becoming increasingly difficult. Due to the distance between them, they could only see each other on weekends, and even then, they had to meet at a location convenient for both of them. Usually, they will rent a cozy hotel room in a secluded spot and use the time to enjoy quality time together. However, by Sunday night, they would have to return to their respective homes, as they had work commitments on Monday mornings. In December 2017, Patrick made a significant decision. He relocated to Delton, where his mother lived, in order to be nearer to his girlfriend. He purchased a house in a quiet neighborhood and began making repairs to create a welcoming home for Jessica. Although she couldn't move right away because of work, but they made plans to get together again and have a housewarming party in early spring. They had a special celebration planned on New Year's Eve. To surprise Jessica, Patrick set up a fireworks display in the backyard, getting down on one knee to make his romantic proposal as they gazed up at the festive lights. Patrick got down on one knee, held out a box with a ring, and asked Jessica the most important question of all: would she become his wife? Overjoyed, Jessica happily agreed. Patrick had been looking for an engagement ring for a long time, but in jewelry stores there was no ring beautiful and delicate enough for the occasion. He chose the best option possible to propose before the new year, but he also had a custom ring made from a jewelry shop, designed by himself. Patrick's engagement was just 2 months old, and the wedding preparations were well underway. His choice of partner had been approved by their parents, and they was overjoyed as they prepared to start a new life together. They had plans for a grand celebration, either in Miami on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean or in France, where the groom's mother was from, on February 27, 2018. On that day, Patrick's father, Max, received a call from a courier while he was at work. The delivery man explained that Patrick's order has been delivered, but Patrick did not answer the door or answer the phone. Max was taken aback by Patrick's unexpected actions, which immediately raised his level of concern. Since Max was tied up at work and couldn't go check on Patrick, Max asked his future daughter-in-law to go instead. Patrick's father called Jessica in a panicked tone, saying he couldn't reach his son. Jessica had been trying to contact Patrick all morning, but he wasn't responding to her calls or messages. When she shared this with Patrick's father, Max, he feared the worst. Jessica immediately dropped everything and rushed to Patrick's house. When she arrived, she saw his car in the driveway, indicating he was still at home. Using her own key, she entered the yard and called out to Patrick, but there was no response. Jessica carefully opened the front door and was met with a horrific sight. Patrick was lying in a pool of blood, showing no signs of life. She quickly called emergency services, but the paramedics were unable to save Patrick and declared him dead at the scene. When the police arrived, Jessica was overcome with grief, sobbing in the backyard where Patrick had proposed to her just 2 months earlier. An officer spoke to her, and she raised her tear-filled eyes to meet his. She claimed to know who was accountable for Patrick's murder, naming her wealthy ex-boyfriend as the culprit. To comprehend this complex case and identify potential suspects, it's essential to revisit the past when Patrick first met Jessica. At that time, Jessica was in a relationship with Gregory Bender, a wealthy businessman who owned an investment fund. She met Gregory during her student years, and he was 20 years her senior. Gregory showered Jessica with expensive gifts and took her on lavish vacations, eventually winning her affection. Jessica thought she had found her soulmate, but soon she began to notice some disturbing patterns in her ex-boyfriend Gregory's behavior. He was extremely controlling, constantly monitoring her movements and interactions with others. If she had an admirer, Gregory would quickly get rid of them through threats and intimidation. Meanwhile, he kept his own life a mystery, sharing very little about himself with Jessica. Their relationship lasted nearly 8 years, during which time Gregory never introduced Jessica to his family or friends. They only spent time together or went on vacation when he wanted to, and he rarely invited her to his home. Gregory claimed he was too busy, but Jessica longed for a normal family life and children. However, every time she brought it up, Gregory would say it wasn't the right time. When Jessica tried to end the relationship, Gregory proposed to her with a ring, and she accepted. However, nothing changed. They still lived apart and only saw each other when Gregory wanted to. One day, Gregory was in a car accident and ended up in the hospital. When Jessica rushed to his side, she decided to stop by his house to pick up some things for him. That's when she encountered a woman she had never seen before. Instead of introducing herself, the stranger asked Jessica who she was. Jessica showed her the ring on her hand and that she was the landlord's fiancée. Jessica later found out that Gregory was married to someone else, Diora Sanchez Bender. Devastated, Jessica immediately broke off the relationship. However, Gregory really wanted to keep her, begging for forgiveness and promising to divorce his wife and marry Jessica in the future. Jessica eventually gave in and continued the affair, but as time went on, nothing changed, and Jessica became exhausted. Jessica changed her life and started dating someone new, Patrick, through a dating website. She then ended her relationship with Gregory and informed him that it was over. But Gregory did not give up and started to do worse things. Gregory asked Jessica to reconsider their relationship. He then became aggressive, and he resorted to threatening and harassing her. Realizing that Jessica had moved on, Gregory turned to private investigators to hack into her online accounts and find out who she was talking to. He soon discovered Patrick's identity and contact information. Then, Gregory started sending threatening messages to Patrick. Patrick received threatening messages from Gregory, Jessica's ex-boyfriend, who demanded that Patrick end his relationship with Jessica, referring to her as his fiancée. After receiving the threats, Patrick remained calm because he thought they would not come true. However, Jessica is scared because she knows Gregory's aggressive nature and that he has a large collection of weapons. She suggested breaking up with Patrick to avoid any potential harm, but Patrick refused. They decided to report the incidents to the police, providing evidence of Gregory's stalking and threats. They obtained a restraining order, which prohibited Gregory from approaching or contacting them. Additionally, Gregory was required to surrender his firearms. For a while, the situation seemed to calm down, and they thought they had finally found peace. Nevertheless, Jessica convinced Patrick to install CCTV cameras around and inside their home, fearing that Gregory might violate the restraining order. Let's go back to the events of February 27, 2018. During the initial crime scene inspection, investigators quickly ruled out robbery as a motive. Instead, they believed the murder was personally motivated, given the nature of Patrick's injuries, which suggested a deep-seated hatred. Patrick, 25 years old, had 4 gunshot wounds, 1 in the thigh, 1 in the chest, and 2 in the head. The body also showed signs of a fall from a ladder. The body was found on the floor between the front door and the stairs leading to the second floor. Investigators theorized that the killer likely snuck into the house and waited for the owner, Patrick, on the second floor. When Patrick entered the house and began to climb the stairs, the killer ambushed him, shooting him in the thigh. As Patrick rolled down the stairs, the killer followed, shooting him in the chest and then twice in the head. The murder weapon, a rare pistol, was not recovered, but several shell casings were found at the crime scene. The police found 3 casings at the scene, but a 4th one was missing. This led investigators to suspect that the killer might have taken it as a souvenir. The initial suspect was Patrick's neighbor, a U.S. Army veteran who had a history of conflict with Patrick. The veteran had been involved in combat and had suffered a severe head injury, which led to the development of a mental disorder. The veteran was skilled with firearms and had access to rare guns. In a previous incident, the veteran had mistakenly shot at his neighbor, thinking he was a burglar. After his release, the veteran continued to harass the victim, accusing him of being a spy and threatening to expose him. The investigation initially centered around the veteran with a history of mental health issues, as his unusual behavior and mindset suggested a possible motive for the crime. Although he truly hated Patrick, he still had an alibi for the time of the murder, confirmed by many witnesses. As the police looked for evidence and attempted to provoke a response from the perpetrator, it became clear that the crime was not a robbery gone. As the house was undisturbed and valuables remained untouched. The only items missing were the hard drives containing video surveillance footage, making it impossible to identify who entered and left the house that day. Furthermore, no evidence was found at the crime scene. Forensic experts were unable to find a single fingerprint, shoe print, or DNA trace, suggesting that the murder was meticulously planned and executed. Although the investigation suspected Gregory's involvement, it seemed likely that he would escape justice due to the lack of concrete evidence. The police asked Jessica to help them with a secret plan to catch her ex-boyfriend, Gregory, off guard. She agreed to make the call, and as the police had hoped, Gregory answered. Jessica tried to lure him into a conversation, but it quickly became apparent that he had anticipated the trap and was not falling for it. Gregory seemed unflappable as Jessica confronted him about Patrick's death. When she accused him directly, he acted shocked and even offered her his condolences. Despite her best efforts to get him to lose his cool, he didn't give away any incriminating information. In the end, the police didn't have enough evidence to hold or question Gregory, so he remained at large, abiding by the terms of a restraining order. He appeared to have already distanced himself from Jessica, makes gathering evidence more difficult. As the police investigation stagnated due to lack of evidence, Diora Sanchez, Gregory's wife, called to reveal she had vital information about Patrick's death. Upon arrival at the police station, Diora told investigators about discovering a cryptic notebook in Gregory's office just days before the crime occurred. Upon flipping through the notebook's pages, Diora stumbled upon an entry containing an address she didn't recognize, accompanied by a series of cryptic digits that appeared to be a code. Diora had previously ignored some suspicious sketches made by Gregory, but when she saw a news report about a young man's murder, she realized the significance of those sketches. The crime scene's layout matched the drawings Gregory had made. Diora informed the investigators, who then obtained a search warrant for Gregory's house. Upon searching, the police found a mysterious notebook in Gregory's office, but several key pages were missing. They later discovered those pages in a trash can, carelessly discarded after being ripped out and crumpled. The pages contained a detailed plan of the crime, including turning off the victim's phone, wearing gloves, and using a special lubricant on shoes to avoid leaving footprints. The records also revealed that Gregory had been stalking the victim, Patrick, and knew his daily routine, including the time he returned home. Furthermore, Gregory knew the location of surveillance cameras in and around Patrick's house, suggesting this was a carefully planned and executed crime. In addition to committing the crime, Gregory took steps to cover his tracks by disposing of the weapon, clothes, shoes, and gloves. However, he failed to destroy his own records, which later incriminated him. Furthermore, his wife's curiosity ultimately worked against him. A shell casing was discovered in a cigar box, which was meant to be taken as a trophy by the gunman. Forensic analysis confirmed that the casing matched the one found at the crime scene. The trial of Gregory posed a challenge due to the lack of direct evidence. Although the accumulated evidence was sufficient to arrest him, it was largely circumstantial. Since the crime weapon was never recovered, there was no definitive proof that Gregory was at the victim's house on the day of the crime. Moreover, there were no eyewitnesses to testify against him. The trial, which began in May 2021, more than 3 years after the crime, was heavily influenced by the skilled lawyers Gregory hired. He appeared confident and seemed to believe he would evade punishment. A crucial witness, Jessica, provided detailed testimony about her long-term relationship with Gregory, including his marital status, her attempts to break up with him, and the subsequent harassment and threats he made against her and Patrick. Jessica presented evidence of her conversations with Gregory, including screenshots of their conversations and their phone records. However, Gregory's lawyers countered by blaming Jessica, claiming that she was responsible for Gregory's behavior. They claimed that Jessica had started a new relationship with Patrick while still involved with Gregory, and that she had hurt his self-esteem. The defense downplayed the significance of the written plans for the murder, describing them as mere fantasies of a hurt man seeking revenge on his rival. They argued that Gregory never acted on these plans and therefore did not leave any evidence at the crime scene. Additionally, the lawyers claimed that the search of Gregory's home was conducted illegally and with procedural errors, suggesting that the shell casing found there could have been planted. The crime weapon was never found, and Jessica's identification of the gun model was uncertain. She had previously seen a similar gun in her boyfriend's collection, but she wasn't familiar with firearms and could have been mistaken. The defendant's ex-wife, Diora Sanchez, was called to testify. During her testimony, the defendant, Gregory, unexpectedly professed his love for Diora. This declaration seemed to affect Diora, and her testimony became unclear. Diora claimed to have forgotten some details and ultimately stated that she doubted Gregory's capability for murder, given their long history together. Despite the defense's efforts to challenge the search of Gregory's home and the lack of direct evidence, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder after hours of deliberation. Gregory was given a life sentence with no possibility of parole. As the judge read out the sentence, the defendant fixed Jessica with an intense stare, not blinking once. His glare made her feel nauseous. Jessica sat next to Patrick's mother and suddenly burst into uncontrollable sobs, finding it hard to breathe. Despite multiple attempts by Gregory's lawyers to appeal the verdict, all their efforts were unsuccessful. The case attracted public attention, with many outraged that a wealthy businessman had brutally murdered a working-class man and attempted to escape justice. Patrick's story was widely reported in the press, and Gregory remains in prison to this day. Jessica Dira said she is grateful that justice has been served, and Patrick's memory will always live on in her. She wears the engagement ring he gave her and a special piece of jewelry he had intended to give her but never got the chance. Jessica remains close to Patrick's parents, who have welcomed her into their family as one of their own. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Wang Nan. Wang Nan, born in 1987 in Nanjing, China, a major city and former capital, Wang Nan grew up in a relatively affluent family. Her parents provided her with the best possible education and encouraged her to develop her talents. After completing her secondary education, Wang Nan enrolled in a prestigious university, where she studied business and finance, and also learned several foreign languages. Upon graduation, she landed a job at a large travel agency, where she quickly proved herself to be a valuable, responsible, and motivated employee. Her career advanced rapidly, and she was soon sent to Thailand to head a new branch and oversee its development. Wang Nan worked as a top manager for several years before deciding to leave the agency to start her own business. She opened a Chinese restaurant in Bangkok, which she managed successfully, and it eventually grew into a small but popular chain. Wang Nan was a thriving young entrepreneur who had devoted her life to her career. With her constant business engagements, she barely had time for socializing or dating, and her loneliness became a normal part of her life. At almost 30 years old, Wang Nan was well established in Thailand, having lived there for a while and become proficient in the language. However, she strived for further improvement, taking additional courses to learn Thai at a training center. There, she met a young man named Yu Xiaodong, who initially stared at her before introducing himself in his native language. They exchanged brief conversations, and he inquired about her reason for studying the language. Wang Nan replied that it was for business purposes, and Yu Xiaodong proposed exchanging business cards to potentially meet up Sunday. Although Wang Nan was not interested in continuing the conversation, she still politely gave him her business card. Yu Xiaodong also gave Wang Nan his own business card, which said that he worked in the import-export industry in Bangkok. Not very impressed, Wang Nan put the business card in her wallet and forgot about it. Yu Xiaodong was the only one who showed genuine interest in Wang Nan, and he wasted no time in calling her the very next day. However, she was preoccupied with work and couldn't spare even a few minutes to talk, so she declined his invitation to meet for coffee. A few days later, Yu Xiaodong asked her out again, but Wang Nan turned him down once more, citing her busy schedule and preparations for an upcoming business conference where she hoped to expand her professional network. Undeterred, Yu Xiaodong showed up at the conference with a stunning bouquet of flowers and waited for Wang Nan to become available. When she was free, he approached her and asked her out once more. This time, Wang Nan was charmed by his persistence, which was a new experience for her. No one had ever pursued her so relentlessly before, so she agreed to meet him for dinner. As it turned out, Yu Xiaodong's interest in Wang Nan was more than just a passing infatuation. He was completely smitten. He showered her with attention, surprise gifts, and romantic gestures, including sending flowers to her doorstep every morning with sweet notes attached. He also called her at least twice a day to wish her good morning and good night. Wang Nan had mixed emotions about the situation. While she was irritated by Yu Xiaodong's all-consuming infatuation, she was also flattered that someone was making such an effort to win her heart. As a result, she found herself unexpectedly entering into a romantic relationship. Yu Xiaodong went out of his way to woo her, not only romantically but also by trying to be perfect in every aspect of their relationship. He shared her interests and opinions, learned to cook her favorite meals, and planned exciting activities for them to enjoy together. He was also eager to help her with her work and household chores at a moment's notice. Wang Nan was over the moon with happiness, feeling as though she was living in a fairy tale. Yu Xiaodong's behavior, however, was moving at a breakneck pace. Despite having only been together for a few months, he was already making plans for their wedding and discussing potential names for their future children. This made Wang Nan uncomfortable, but Yu Xiaodong would counter by pointing out that they were both in their 30s and that it was time for them to start thinking about building a family. That night, Yu Xiaodong wrote a heartfelt letter to Wang Nan, expressing his deep affection and commitment to being a good husband and father. The next morning, he arrived at her doorstep with a bouquet of flowers, reiterating his seriousness about marrying her. Wang Nan jokingly mentioned that the courthouse wouldn't open for another hour and a half, but Yu Xiaodong suggested they go there immediately. To her surprise, the courthouse was open, and the officer responsible for registering marriages was already at his desk, ready to formalize their union. Yu Xiaodong had secretly arranged for a hasty marriage ceremony to take place early in the morning. The whole event was unusual and lacking in formality. There were no guests, no exchange of rings, no wedding dress or veil, and no commemorative photographs. Wang Nan couldn't shake the feeling that the whole thing wasn't really happening, especially since she hadn't even introduced her new husband to her mother, with whom she was extremely close. Before she knew it, she was holding a marriage certificate in her hand, and her newlywed husband was standing beside her, beaming with satisfaction. Wang Man's marriage was troubled from the start. She had second thoughts about marrying Yu Xiaodong almost immediately after the wedding. Initially, she had hoped he would be a reliable partner, a man she could depend on. Unfortunately, her expectations were not met, and her new husband's true nature soon revealed itself. Yu Xiaodong spent most of his time at home playing video games, using his wife's money without contributing to their household expenses. Whenever his wife asked him why he wasn't working, he claimed his business was slow due to seasonal fluctuations and that he was just taking a break. However, her suspicions grew as time passed, and she decided to investigate his business. Her findings shocked her. His supposedly successful import-export company existed only on paper and business cards. Wang Man was horrified, realizing too late that she should have had a prenuptial agreement. Now, her husband could freely spend her earnings, and if they divorced, he would claim her assets. During a tense conversation, Yu Xiaodong broke down in tears, promising to turn his life around and find a good job. However, it soon became apparent that he had no intention of looking for work and was content to rely on his wife's support. Yu Xiaodong, a grown man, consistently acted like a child. He spent most of his time playing computer games and expected his wife, Wang Man, to pay for his personal expenses whenever he helped out around the house or assisted her at the restaurant. Wang Man eventually had enough and told him she would no longer give him money unless he got a job. The next day, Yu Xiaodong disappeared, taking their marriage certificate and Wang Nan's identity card with him. Wang Nan only discovered the missing documents that evening when her accountant called to inquire about a large transfer of funds from her account. She was shocked, as she had not authorized the transfer. However, she immediately suspected her husband's involvement. It turned out that Yu Xiaodong had transferred more than $500,000 into his own account, using the stolen documents to deceive the bank into thinking it was their joint decision to transfer their shared money. Wang Nan quickly reported the theft to the police, who tracked down Yu Xiaodong a few hours later as he attempted to withdraw some of the stolen money. Confronted by the police and his wife, Xiaodong broke down and begged for forgiveness on his knees. He confessed to losing a large sum of money through gambling, which had led to threats of death and demands to repay the debt. This was not his first brush with the law, as he had previously served an 8-year prison sentence for robbery in his home country of China. Wang Man was consumed by shame as she learned the truth about her husband's past. Despite this, she believed that his addiction to gambling was a disease that could be overcome, and she wanted to help him recover and return to a normal life. To support him, Wang Nan agreed to pay off half of his debt and offered him a job as Hickey of one of her restaurants. Initially, Yu Xiaodong appeared to be grateful for the opportunity and took his new role seriously. He even developed a promising strategy for the restaurant's growth. However, his enthusiasm was short-lived. Before long, he began to spend more time playing computer games and indulging in other leisure activities. Meanwhile, Wang Man discovered she was pregnant and shared the news with her husband. Yu Xiaodong initially expressed reservations about the pregnancy, and in a moment of hesitation, asked his wife to consider an abortion, which she flatly refused. The disagreement escalated to the point where he threatened divorce and division of their property, but eventually, his demeanor softened, and he apologized for his rash words. Yu Xiaodong later admitted that his outburst was driven by emotional anxiety, but ultimately, he was happy about the impending arrival of their child. However, things took a dramatic turn 2 months later. During a fateful trip, Yu Xiaodong suggested that his wife purchase life insurance, citing the pregnancy as a reason to safeguard her well-being and that of their unborn child in the event of any unforeseen circumstances. This seemingly caring gesture came after a period of harmony in their marriage, where he had been attentive, supportive, and diligent in his role as a husband and expectant father. Wan Nan quickly agreed to her husband's suggestion and even wondered why she hadn't thought of it herself. They purchased insurance the very next day. A couple of weeks later, Yu Xiaodong proposed a vacation to help them relax and unwind. Wan Man was initially hesitant, but her husband was insistent. He pointed out that they had never had a honeymoon and that traveling with a baby would be difficult in the coming years. He also felt that they needed a break to clear their minds of the stress and negativity they had been experiencing. Wan Man was eventually won over by her husband's arguments and agreed to the trip. He took charge of planning the entire vacation, choosing the destination, booking the hotel, and organizing activities that would be enjoyable and educational, yet not too strenuous for Wang Nan's pregnant state. Wang Man was happy to leave the planning to her husband and was pleased to see how much effort he was putting into making their vacation special. On June 7th, they visited the park for the first time and spent most of the day exploring its many beautiful sights and lookouts. However, as the summer evening wore on, the park became increasingly crowded, with tourists everywhere. As the sun began to set, Wang Nan noticed that her husband, Yu Xiaodong, was growing angry and nervous. When she asked him what was wrong, he explained that the crowds were ruining their chance to enjoy a romantic sunset in peace. Despite his initial frustration, Yu Xiaodong tried to make the most of the situation, suggesting that they could still have a romantic moment as the sun set. As the park began to clear out, he climbed the fence of the observation deck and called out to his wife, Wan Nan, to join him, promising her an incredible view. However, Wang declined, citing the darkness and potential danger. Yu Xiaodong became angry but eventually returned to his wife, suggesting that they should come back to the park another time to watch the sunrise together. The Wang Nan and Yu Xiaodong returned to their hotel late on Saturday night, so they decided to sleep in and head back to the reserve early on Sunday morning. As planned, they woke up at 3 a.m. on June 9th and left for the national park while it was still dark outside. Their goal was to catch the first rays of the rising sun. When they arrived, they found the park nearly empty, with hardly any other visitors. They watched the sunrise together on an observation deck. Then, Yu Xiaodong encouraged his wife, Wan Nan, to join him at the cliff's edge to see some ancient rock paintings. Initially hesitant, Wan Nan trusted her husband's assurance that he would help her climb down and back up safely. As they took in the breathtaking view, Yu Xiaodong suddenly asked Wan Nan if she regretted anything in life. She replied that she did not. However, in a shocking turn of events, Yu Xiaodong's demeanor changed. He touched his wife's hair, kissed her cheek, whispered "die" in her ear, and then pushed her off the cliff. To avoid detection, he checked their surroundings to make sure no one had witnessed the incident. Looking down, he couldn't see where Wan Nan had fallen, and the silence indicated that there were no witnesses below. Yu Xiaodong calmly walked towards the park exit, planning to report the incident after his wife was surely dead. However, hikers who had wandered off the trail spotted Wan Nan's body on the rocks and immediately called for rescue, reporting the incident. As Yu Xiaodong was leaving the reserve, several emergency vehicles sped past him, sirens blaring. Realizing what was happening, he quickly returned to the scene, pretending to be distressed. There, he put on a convincing performance, crying and begging for help. Convinced that his wife was dead and no one would discover the truth, he remained unaware that Wan Nan's fall had been broken by tree branches, which reduced her speed before she landed on bushes and then rolled onto the rocks. This series of events cushioned the impact, saving her life and that of their child, although she suffered severe injuries. Yu Xiaodong was overcome with grief, crying and lamenting the loss of his wife and child. However, his wife suddenly regained consciousness and attempted to speak, but was unable to. The people around her noticed the genuine horror on Yu Xiaodong's face, but he quickly composed himself and leaned in close to his wife. In a hushed tone, he warned her in Chinese to remain silent if she wanted to survive. Wang Nan's injuries were severe, including head trauma, multiple fractures, lacerations, soft tissue contusions, ruptured internal organs, and massive blood loss. Her spine was also severely damaged, leaving doctors concerned that even if she survived, she would likely be paralyzed and never walk again. Wang Nan spent several days in a coma, connected to life support machines, during which time her husband remained by her side constantly. However, despite his devoted appearance, Yu Xiaodong's intentions were sinister. Every time he was alone with his wife, he thought about how to complete the job without arousing suspicion. His actions were a ruse, hiding his true intentions behind a mask of love and devotion that he examined the devices, but couldn't find a way to quietly disable them. Wang Nan slowly regained consciousness. When she did, her husband was beside himself with fear. He stayed with her constantly, terrified that she would reveal the truth to the police at any moment. When they were alone, he threatened her again, saying he had nothing to lose. During the initial police interrogation, the Wang Nan supported her husband's claim that her fall was caused by dizziness. However, when her husband briefly left the room, Wang Nan asked the nurse to call the police again and prevent her husband from re-entering. It was then that she recounted the disturbing story of her fall, alleging that her husband had attempted to kill her. Yu Xiaodong suddenly burst into the room, shouting that his wife was delusional due to her head injury and that he would never harm her or their baby. His explanation was not believable, and he was arrested on the same day. At the hospital, he was charged with multiple crimes, including attempted murder and intimidation after her husband was taken into custody and sent to jail to await trial. Wang Nan finally felt a sense of relief. Although she still had a long and difficult recovery ahead of her, she now felt safe. Wang Nan initially held on to hope that her pregnancy could be saved, despite the severe fall. However, her medical team advised her to terminate the pregnancy due to the large amounts of painkillers and antibiotics she was receiving, as well as the multiple surgeries she underwent under general anesthesia. The doctors prioritized Wang Nan's life, warning her that the fetus was unlikely to survive the strong medications. This news came as a devastating shock to Wang Nan, but she ultimately followed the doctor's advice. During the trial, Yu Xiaodong vehemently denied any wrongdoing, sticking to his claim that the incident was an accident. He remained calm and composed in prison, hiring skilled lawyers and expressing confidence that he would either be acquitted or receive a lenient sentence. In contrast, the investigators and prosecutor were convinced that Yu Xiaodong had deliberately committed the crime. Motivated by the prospect of collecting a substantial insurance payout and inheriting his wife's fortune, which was valued at nearly $2.5 million at the time. During an interrogation, Yu Xiaodong made a shocking revelation about his motive for the heinous crime. He disclosed that he was angry with his wife for not paying off his entire debt, which had accumulated due to his gambling habit. In his mind, if his wife truly loved him, she would have cleared all his debts since she had the financial means to do so. This perceived betrayal led Yu Xiaodong to believe that his wife did not love him, and therefore, he felt justified in punishing her. After making this astonishing confession, the defendant became silent, seemingly aware that he had revealed too much. He attempted to retract his statement, claiming that he had been misunderstood. Nevertheless, his unexpected admission, combined with Wang Nan's testimony, was sufficient to secure a lengthy prison sentence. In March 2021, Yu Xiaodong was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, he and his lawyers filed multiple appeals, and 6 months later, the Thai court showed unusual leniency by reducing the life sentence to 10 years in prison. Wang Nan and her family were shocked and outraged by the lenient sentence given to Yu Xiaodong, believing it would set a bad precedent and encourage others to commit similar heinous crimes. Yu Xiaodong received a sentence of 10 years for attempting to murder his pregnant Wang Nan. As of now, Yu Xiaodong is serving her 10-year sentence while Wang Nan is challenging the court's decision. Meanwhile, Yu Xiaodong is filing appeals to prove her innocence. Wang Man has successfully restarted her business in 2023 and also established an organization that provides support to women who have been affected by domestic violence. She writes about her personal experiences and warnings for women on her blog. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Joseph Saunier. Joseph Saunier was born in 1955 to a respected family of doctors in Shreveport, Louisiana. From a young age, he aspired to follow in his family's footsteps and become a doctor. With exceptional abilities, Joseph earned a Bachelor of Science in Medical Science from the University of Baton Rouge in 1976. He then applied to Louisiana State University in Shreveport and began working at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas. Joseph effectively balanced his university studies and work. He consistently refined his knowledge through hands-on experience at the hospital. The hospital management recognized Joseph's success and dedication, and in his final year of training, he was appointed chief resident. After completing his studies, Joseph chose to specialize in pathologic anatomy and went on to become a pathologist and laboratory director in Leck, Texas. Joseph's life was marked by personal tragedy, including the loss of the woman he loved, Becky. His 27-year marriage, which he considered happy, ended in divorce when his wife fell in love with another man. Joseph accepted her decision and agreed to the divorce, believing that the woman he loved had found happiness. Joseph had a strong sense of responsibility and nobility. After his divorce from Becky, he maintained a warm relationship with her and continued to support their 2 sons. 2 years later, Becky was killed by her new husband. Joseph was shocked by her death. He often thought about their past family life and mourned her loss. Despite his own grief, Joseph remained a source of strength for his family. He took care of the funeral expenses and helped his sons cope with the trauma. His sons later credited his support for helping them overcome their pain. The tragedy had a profound impact on Joseph. He devoted himself to his work and raising his sons. However, the grief finally gave him the motivation to change his life. He decides to start a new chapter in a new city. In 2007, Joseph moved to Leck, Texas, with his sons, where he became the chief pathologist at Covenant Health System. Feeling the need for a change, Joseph enrolled in a local dance studio. He enjoyed the classes and met new women, which helped fill the void in his life. A few times, Joseph attempted to form connections with his dance partners, but it never worked out. That was until Michelle Tina walked into his dance class on a warm summer evening. Her elegance, poise, sense of humor, and sparkling eyes immediately caught his attention. Her radiant smile illuminated the room, and Joseph knew right then that she was the one he had been searching for. Michelle, too, noticed Joseph's confident and respectful demeanor on the dance floor. As they danced together, the 47-year-old Michelle and 57-year-old Joseph found that they complemented each other perfectly. As they continued to dance together, they grew closer with each passing session. Eventually, Joseph asked Michelle out on a date, and she agreed. This marked the beginning of what seemed like a happy new chapter in both of their lives. Michelle possessed an irresistible charm that had a profound effect on men. Michelle was a classic example of a femme fatale, a woman with an undeniable magnetism that drew attention and sparked passion in those around her. Michelle, like Joseph, is also starting a new life after personal emotional breakdowns. She is running away from the fear and anxiety associated with Mike Dixon, owner of a private clinic for cosmetic surgery. Michelle met Mike in 2008 when she came in for Botox injections. At first, there was just casual social interaction between them, then light flirting followed and they began a romance. Michelle is a successful and free woman. She worked as an executive in the NFL, built a successful career, and didn't lack for anything. Mike, on the other hand, is bound by his marriage. A few months after living a double life, his wife discovered his affair with Michelle and filed for divorce after 20 years of marriage. Mike is so captivated by Michelle that he barely notices that he is losing everything. Mike left his wife for Michelle, even though she never announced she would marry him. When Mike doesn't get the attention he expected, he tries to pressure Michelle, which scares her. Michelle recognized Mike's manipulative behavior and desire to take complete control of her life. This realization caused her to end the relationship. In 2010, Michelle and Mike went their separate ways. However, even after the breakup, Mike continued to pursue Michelle, urging her to return. His obsession exceeds the limit, forcing Michelle to find a way to escape Mike's control. Michelle moved to Lek to start anew, where she met Joseph, a charming and kind-hearted man. They quickly connected, and their relationship blossomed into true love. Joseph's sons and relatives welcomed Michelle with open arms. Joseph spared no expense in giving her gifts, taking her to the most luxurious restaurants and private clubs, and giving her romantic vacations. As Joseph realized he had found his perfect match, he took Michelle to Los Angeles and proposed to her in front of his entire family. Michelle, 47 at the time, was smitten with her new partner and frequently expressed her love for him on social media. However, her ex-lover, Mike Dixon, couldn't help but notice these declarations of love. Mike is furious when he discovers that Michelle has moved away and is planning to marry Joseph. He realized he couldn't win her back but still dared to propose that they rekindle their past relationship, suggesting they become lovers again. Michelle firmly rejected his proposal, refusing to engage in a love triangle, and immediately informed Joseph about Mike's suggestion. After some time, they started to feel like they were being watched. At one point, they even noticed something that looked like a camera flash through the backyard window, but they didn't pay much attention to it, not realizing the seriousness of the problem. The situation got out of control on July 11, 2012, when a gardener came to Joseph's house to discuss a garden renovation project. When the landscaper arrived at the home, he tried to contact Joseph but got no response. He saw an open door and, thinking Joseph might not be able to hear him, went inside. The house was in disarray, and there was a bullet hole near the front door, indicating a possible intruder. The landscaper cautiously went further inside, looking for Joseph. In the garage, he found Joseph lying in a pool of blood on the floor with no signs of life. Joseph's body had stab and gunshot wounds, leading the landscaper to think the perpetrator might be nearby. He immediately left the house and called for help. At 2:48 p.m., the police department received the call, and several patrol cars were sent to the scene. When the officers arrived, they found Joseph Sonnier. Medics confirmed that Joseph had died. The incident shocked the public, as it happened in one of the city's safest and most affluent neighborhoods, where crime is extremely rare. Joseph, a respected professional, was known for his calm and kind nature, and it seemed he had no enemies who would want to harm him. Although a window was broken, it was clear that the incident was not a robbery, as nothing was missing from the house. However, a bottle with a hole shot through its bottom was found at the scene, suggesting it was used as a makeshift silencer for a gun. A forensic team arrived soon after to collect evidence, and it appeared that the perpetrator was inexperienced, as they left behind many traces. DNA from the bottle and blood samples were sent to a lab for further analysis. Detectives interviewed neighbors, but none of them reported seeing or hearing anything suspicious. There were no CCTV cameras near the house. According to the investigation, the perpetrator entered through a large window overlooking the backyard, making the attack unexpected. In the dining room, the attacker confronted Joseph and started shooting. It is likely that the wine bottle was used as a silencer at this point. Blood stains in the hallway suggested that Joseph was still alive after being shot. He entered the garage, where the attacker caught up with him and stabbed him multiple times. An autopsy revealed 5 gunshot wounds and 11 stab wounds. The circumstances suggested that the murder was not random, but the identity and motive of the killer remained unknown. The investigation focused on the people closest to the victim. During an interview with law enforcement, the victim's fiancée, Michelle, reported strange things in the months leading up to the murder. She believed Joseph was being stalked. Michelle had seen a stranger lurking outside Joseph's house, watching the door and windows. She also mentioned that Joseph had received persistent calls and texts in the period leading up to his death. Although officers confirmed this information, they initially thought the calls and messages were from other women with whom Joseph was allegedly having relationships, as witnesses claimed he was in contact with multiple women at the time. Investigators questioned Michelle about whether she knew of other women involved with Joseph. Michelle claimed she was unaware of any other women. Joseph's sons also denied the possibility of their father having mistresses, stating that infidelity was not in his character. Despite this, investigators continued to explore a motive of jealousy for the crime. During the subsequent interrogation, Michelle succumbs to the pressure and reveals that she knows several women who may be involved in the crime. According to Michelle, these women are ex-girlfriends who often stalk Joseph. Although he ignored them, they continued to express their displeasure about his upcoming wedding to Michelle. The women in question include a woman from Florida who persisted in contacting Joseph even after he revealed his relationship with Michelle. There was also a nurse, Joseph's colleague, who often called and wrote to him. Additionally, a woman whose daughter sent a letter accusing Joseph of abandoning them shortly before the murder. In the same interview, Michelle mentioned Mike Dixon for the first time. She hadn't thought about Mike spying on her and Joseph before, because Mike stopped paying attention to her after she refused to be his lover. Michelle assumed that Mike had accepted her decision to marry Joseph and move on with his own life. The police visited Mike. He cooperated and spoke with the detectives. Mike revealed that he had been deeply in love with Michelle and had even divorced his wife to pursue a future with her. However, after Michelle rejected him, Mike gave up. He started a new relationship with a younger medical student who corroborated his alibi. At the time of the crime, Mike was at work and then spent time with his new girlfriend, which confirmed he couldn't have been involved. The investigation encountered significant obstacles. Every suspect, including Michelle, had a solid alibi, leaving detectives stumped. They searched for enemies of Joseph or individuals who might benefit financially from his death. But no new leads emerged. Unfortunately, forensic analysis does not provide any information about an individual, so police cannot identify the owner of the DNA found at the crime scene. Just as the case seemed hopeless, the police received an unexpected call from Paul Reynolds. Reynolds reported that his roommate, David Shepard, had recently confessed to a murder in Leck and then attempted to take his own life but was saved. According to Reynolds, a neighbor shared specific details about David's crimes with him, including details that only a few detectives knew, such as the use of a glass bottle as a silencer. This new information led police to conclude that Shepard was indeed connected to the crime. The witness came forward claiming that David was not the mastermind behind the crime, but rather a person who was hired by an unknown doctor involved in plastic surgery. Police launched an investigation into the new suspect and discovered that Mike Dixon was the person who hired David. When questioned at the police station, David began to confess and revealed that Mike Dixon had indeed hired him to commit the crime. According to David, he and Mike met at a bar while both were going through difficult breakups and formed a friendship. Mike shared his sadness over his lost love, Michelle, who was now engaged to someone else. He claimed that he couldn't move on and was willing to do whatever it took to win her back. David alleged that the initial plan was to discredit Joseph, Michelle's current partner, in the hopes that Michelle would leave him and return to Mike. However, David claimed that murder was not part of the original plan. First, women were paid $1,000 each to pretend to be Joseph's mistresses and pursue him. Additionally, a letter arrived from a woman claiming Joseph had abandoned her and their child. Joseph consistently denied these allegations, and Michelle believed him. It was later revealed that the camera flash seen by the couple was actually the light from David's cell phone flashlight. David had been driving to their house to create the illusion of surveillance. Funded by Mike Dixon, who covered gas and other expenses. When these tactics failed to break the couple apart, Mike plotted a more extreme solution. He offered David 3 silver bars, valued at around $110,000, to kill the pathologist. David agreed and received one of the bars as a deposit, which he immediately sold at a pawn shop. According to David Shepard, the situation escalated out of control when he went to Joseph's house. He claimed the shooting was unintentional, and that after shooting Joseph, he became afraid and Joseph began to run away. David shouted to check on Joseph but received no response. He then followed Joseph into the garage, where he found Joseph lying still and heard his last breath. David rushed to check Joseph's pulse and confirmed that Joseph was dead. David admitted to stabbing Joseph several times but could not remember the exact number. David also admitted that he considered calling for help using Joseph's phone, but ultimately chose not to. Instead, he put the phone back, mutilated Joseph's body, and then went to Mike's house to get the rest of the gold before attempting to take his own life. According to David, he didn't fully understand what he was getting himself into. When he faced Joseph, he realized he could not continue killing. If it weren't for an accidental gunshot, Joseph might still be alive. Mike Dixon was arrested by the police on the same day and charged with first-degree murder. This was based on testimony from David, as well as a large amount of other evidence that included incriminating phone calls and text messages where Mike made explicit confessions. When Mike Dixon was first interviewed by detectives, they had hoped he would confess to the crime. However, he denied everything and asked for a lawyer, which led to a lawsuit. David Shepard, who had been involved in the crime, made a deal with the prosecutor where he pleaded guilty to his role and gave up his right to appeal the sentence. As a result of this deal, David received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, instead of the death penalty. Mike Dixon, on the other hand, maintained that he was not guilty, despite the circumstantial evidence against him. However, in a surprising turn of events, David, who was a key witness for the prosecution, changed his story during the trial. Under oath, David claimed that he had committed the crime alone and that Mike Dixon was not involved. He said that the silver bars found at the scene were meant to be used as an investment in a business that the two of them had planned to start. The jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict, and a retrial was declared. The second trial occurred in 2016, resulting in Mike's conviction for first-degree murder and a life sentence without parole. However, his lawyer successfully appealed the judgment, and it was overturned. Mike was released on $2 million bail, but the case was far from over. The prosecution sought to reinstate the original sentence through the state's highest criminal court, which would have otherwise led to a third trial. On February 11, 2019, the prosecution's motion was granted, and in April 2020, Mike's bail was revoked, prompting a new arrest warrant. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals ultimately reversed the lower court's decision, reinstating Mike's life sentence without parole. The judge ordered Mike to continue serving his sentence, and he is currently incarcerated in a Texas prison. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jessica Knott. Jessica Knott was born on June 22, 1986, in Allamont Springs, Florida. She grew up in a loving family with her parents, an older brother, and a younger sister. Her father worked in construction and often traveled to other states for work, so her mother mainly took care of her and her siblings. Throughout her childhood, Jessica was a cheerful and active girl who loved playing outdoors with her friends and siblings and had a special love for animals. On April 5, 1996, when Jessica was 9 years old, her family planned to visit her grandparents for Easter. While her mother packed for the trip, her father went to the store to buy some vacation items. Jessica asked her mother if she could go to the yard to wait for her father to return. Her mother agreed but told her to stay in the yard and not wander off. The family's apartment complex was located in a quiet area, surrounded by many trees and away from the main road. The neighborhood was considered safe, and children often played outside without regular adult supervision. However, when Jessica's father returned home around 6 p.m., he asked his wife where Jessica was, and she was surprised to learn that Jessica was not in the yard as she had thought. The parents searched the yard but couldn't find their daughter Jessica. Growing increasingly worried, they started asking neighbors if they had seen Jessica. A neighbor reported seeing Jessica sitting on a bench, reading a book, but this information yielded no results. As night began to fall and Jessica was still missing, her parents contacted the police. The police quickly began search operations, questioning neighbors and canvassing the surrounding area. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to find Jessica, forcing the police to expand their search to nearby streets. A few hours later, the police received an unexpected call from an unknown number. The caller's voice was distorted by background noise. But the police determined that Jessica might have been near a water pumping station several miles from her home. When the police arrived at the water pumping station, they witnessed a horrifying scene. Jessica's body was discovered near the pumping station, hidden in a black trash bag. This location was only a few meters from the road, but the pumping station was located under a bridge, making it nearly impossible to detect. Next to the body were some magazines and a children's mirror. The police quickly identified the victim as Jessica Knott and handed her body over to the medical examiner for further investigation. Investigators turned their attention to tracing the 911 call, which they believed was made by the killer. Their goal was to use the call to identify the killer. However, the call was made from a public phone at a nearby gas station, and when the police arrived, the perpetrator had already fled. Detectives tried to take fingerprints, but it was a difficult task because this was a public phone booth, which likely had many fingerprints from different users. In addition, it was possible that the killer had wiped the phone clean after calling or had worn gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. Further investigation revealed that Jessica may have been killed elsewhere and her body moved to the water pumping station. Evidence on the ground showed that the killer pulled the body out of the car, then put it in a trash bag and dragged it to the water pumping station. Jessica's clothes were still intact, except for a missing shoe, which was not found at the scene. The only potential clue at the crime scene was tire tracks on the ground. There was a possibility that they belonged to the killer's car, so the police took photos and analyzed the prints. Meanwhile, a medical examination of the body showed that the victim died from strangulation, with marks on the face and neck indicating the killer used bare hands. An autopsy showed that Jessica had eaten a hamburger shortly before her death. Her mother said she did not give Jessica a hamburger that day, suggesting the killer may have provided her with food. Additionally, forensic experts found no evidence of sexual assault, leaving the killer's motive unknown. Initially, police had suspected Jessica's parents of being involved in her disappearance because they had not had a solid alibi. Jessica's mother had claimed that she had packed up the apartment, and her father had claimed that he had been out shopping, so they clearly had had the opportunity to commit the crime. The police had been confused as to how the killer had been able to get Jessica out of the yard without anyone noticing or her screaming, leading them to believe that the killer might have been someone Jessica knew and trusted, and she might have voluntarily left with them. The killer's voice on the 911 call had provided another clue. In the recording, experts had detected feelings of grief and remorse, suggesting that the killer had truly felt remorse for his actions. The fact that the killer had taken the risk of calling 911 suggested that they might have been trying to minimize guilt or manipulate the investigation. However, the obvious sadness in the killer's voice had led investigators to believe that the killer had likely been remorseful for his actions. The investigation had reached a turning point when police had found a roll of black garbage bags in the trunk of Jessica's father's car, similar to the bag used to dispose of the victim's body. However, expert examination had shown that the bags had come from another manufacturer, eliminating Jessica's father as a suspect. The focus of the investigation had then turned to other suspects. Forensic experts had conducted a thorough examination of the victim's clothes and body, thereby obtaining many clues. One notable discovery had been that there had been a significant amount of dog hair on Jessica's clothes, even though her family had not owned dogs. This suggested that the dog hair might have come from the perpetrator's dog. Additionally, human hair of an unidentified man had been found on Jessica's body, and experts had been working to extract the DNA profile from the sample. However, this process had taken several days. Further examination had revealed two strange fibers on Jessica's clothes that experts had analyzed and determined likely had originated from car seat covers and carpets. This finding had supported the theory that Jessica had been killed at a location other than the water pumping station and then transported there by car. To determine the breed of dog that had shed hair on Jessica's clothes, experts had used the FBI's specialized database, which contained microscopic photos of hair from many different dog breeds. By comparing fur samples with a database, experts had determined that the fur had belonged to a Shar-Pei. This discovery had suggested that the perpetrator might have owned a Shar-Pei and that the dog's fur had been transferred to Jessica's clothes at the perpetrator's home or in the car. According to investigators' initial theory, the killer might have lured Jessica into his car, taken her to buy hamburgers at McDonald's, and then taken her to his home, where she had been murdered. To aid the investigation, experts had tried to improve the quality of the phone call recordings, but this had proved difficult. They had decided to try a different approach and sought help from NASA, which had advanced audio enhancement tools originally designed for use in space recordings. NASA had agreed to assist and provide police with higher quality audio. However, experts still needed to sample the suspect's voice to compare with the call recording. Detectives had suspected that the killer might have known Jessica, so they had played the call recording for her mother, hoping she could recognize the voice. At first, she had said the voice was familiar but couldn't place it. When she had heard it a second time, she suddenly had realized that the voice belonged to a neighbor who had lived in their complex. Although she couldn't remember his name, she had told detectives that he often had taken his Shar-Pei for walks in the yard. Police had quickly identified this man as James Crow, 35 years old. Hours after Jessica had disappeared, investigators had questioned her neighbors, including James Crow. James had told them that he had seen Jessica in her yard while walking his dog, Pumpkin, a Shar-Pei. They had exchanged a few words and then he had left. Detectives had looked into his past and had found no history of criminal activity. He used to be a truck driver, but had been currently unemployed and had spent most of his time walking around the neighborhood with his dog. Detectives realized that the similarity in voice and breed of dog had not been enough to arrest James, so they obtained a search warrant for James' car. Inside, they found two disturbing clues. Under the front passenger seat, they discovered an empty Happy Meal bag, which was suspicious because James had no children and Jessica had had a McDonald's hamburger in her stomach. Additionally, the car had brand new tires that had barely been used, which James had claimed to have changed on the day Jessica was murdered. However, his previous tire had not been very old and could have lasted a few more years. Police investigated further and discovered that one of James' old tires had been left behind at an auto service. When they compared the tire tread pattern to prints found near Jessica's body, they did not match. However, it was possible that tire marks on the ground did not belong to the killer's car but to another vehicle. Police also searched James' apartment, where they found a box containing several rolls of trash bags similar in size and color to the one found on Jessica's body. To determine if there was any connection between the bags, detectives needed to find a way to prove that they had come from the same manufacturer. At first, this seemed impossible, as the bags had had no distinctive markings or features and there were hundreds of manufacturers of similar products. The detectives had had an idea to solve this problem. They contacted Roberts, a quality control specialist for the company that had manufactured the bags found in James' apartment. Roberts pinpointed the factory that had produced the bags based on a special code on the cardboard box containing the rolls. The code indicated that the product had come from a facility in Virginia. Roberts explained that a small amount of iron or titanium was added to the bag's composition, depending on its color. Because the factory produced bags in many different colors, the materials used in production changed constantly, causing the ratio of plastic and iron or titanium to change daily. To take advantage of this information, experts used high-intensity X-rays to measure the presence of iron and titanium in the plastic of handbags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene. This analysis provided exact ratios of elements, which were identical in both bags. This suggested the bags had been made on the same day and possibly from the same batch. However, there was more to the story than that. During the production of garbage bags, microscopic debris accumulated on the machine and imprinted on the plastic sheets as they were rolled out. This created a unique stripe pattern on each bag, visible to the naked eye. Even though the debris on the conveyor belt was constantly changing, creating a new pattern every few hundred feet of fabric, the results were consistent enough to provide another possible lead in the investigation. The similarity of the bags suggested that not only had they been produced in the same batch, but they had also been produced within a short time frame, perhaps just a few hours apart. Comparison of the bags from the suspect's apartment and the crime scene revealed a striking match in the lines and patterns on the bags. On further inspection, experts showed that the bags had been rolled into bundles by machine, which could have created irregularities during the rolling process. Although these irregularities were hardly noticeable, they could be detected by examining the edges of the bag, where the folds formed a unique pattern. Upon re-examining the bags, experts discovered that the pattern on the bags at the suspect's apartment matched the pattern at the crime scene. Further analysis also revealed that fibers found on Jessica's clothing had matched the carpet in James' apartment and the upholstery of his car seat. An audio expert had also analyzed the 911 call recording and compared it to James's voice sample, concluding that the voice in the recording belonged to James. Although the evidence was only circumstantial, detectives still believed in James' involvement in the case and decided to arrest him. James was taken into custody, and the prosecution announced its intention to seek the death penalty. Despite James continuing to deny guilt, the case still went to trial. The prosecution presented its theories, highlighting James' frequent outdoor activities with his dog, which had earned him the trust of local children, including Jessica. According to police, James had met Jessica while walking his dog and had struck up a conversation. He offered to take her to McDonald's, and she agreed because she knew him. After the meal, James allegedly invited Jessica to his home. While his wife was away, evidence had shown that Jessica was actually at James's house that day, as fibers from his living room carpet were found on her clothes. The investigation revealed that James might have tried to attack Jessica, but something went wrong. Forensic evidence indicated that the killer had strangled Jessica with their bare hands and pressed their palms against her face, possibly to silence her if she tried to scream. Panicked, the killer then placed Jessica's body in a trash bag and transported it to their car without arousing suspicion from the neighbors. The killer dumped her body near a water station, called 911 from a nearby gas station, and returned home. During the preliminary hearings, James's attorneys attempted to defend the evidence, arguing that there was no concrete proof of James' guilt. Although the judge accepted the evidence, the defense pointed out that in murder cases, the standard of proof is higher and more direct. Therefore, the possibility that James could avoid the death penalty was very large. A plea agreement was offered to James based on the circumstances surrounding the case. The deal required him to plead guilty to second-degree murder and accept a sentence of 40 years in prison without parole, thereby avoiding the death penalty. 2 years after the murder, in the summer of 1998, James accepted the deal. Although he was not required to provide details about the crime, he said that one of the reasons he accepted the deal was to spare Jessica's family the torment of the trial. The prosecution believed James showed genuine remorse for his actions and used the 911 call as evidence. The purpose of the call was unclear, but it suggested James was trying to alleviate his guilt. However, Jessica's parents were not satisfied with this deal because they had hoped for the death penalty and wanted James to confess to the crime. Despite this, James remained silent about the details of his actions. James did not fully serve his sentence. He died in November 2011 at the age of 49 from health problems, taking with him details of his crimes and motives.